Wednesday starts a little drier and brighter for many of us, though. There will be some sunshine as we head through the morning, perhaps a little cloudier, though, across parts of Scotland. But as we head in towards Wednesday afternoon, heavy showers developing again. The heavier showers once more across parts of eastern Scotland, northeastern England, but almost anywhere could see a shower through the afternoon, again with some hail and thunder mixed in too. Perhaps a little warmer than Tuesday, with highs of 19 or 20 degrees, and a little cooler further north.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning.
Good morning.
First time we've been together since the Tories announced their national service plan. We'll tell you what we think of that.
And also the private schools as well. What is this 20% VAT on private schools going to mean for people? Pensioners as well. Is it just that the Tories are desperate for the elderly vote now and they're throwing what they can at it?
Well, they are, but will Labour match it? And we're also hoping to speak to Nigel Farage. He's been making yet a few more waves.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M18 in South Yorkshire, there's a lane closed on the southbound exit to the northbound M1 at junction 32 to the east of Sheffield, causing delays. In Lincolnshire, the A16 is closed in both directions between the Pinchbeck turnoff and the A152 at Spalding after an accident yesterday afternoon, causing delays. Now, on the M11 from Essex into London, 2 out of 3 lanes are closed southbound after an accident and oil spill between junctions 5 and 4 from Loughton to the North Circular, with queues towards there. In Bristol, the A4 is closed each way at Kensham after an accident causing queues. On the M26 in Kent, the westbound queues getting onto the M25 because of roadworks. In East Sussex, the A22 is closed each way at Arkfield after an accident, and Skybus flights to and from the Isles of Scilly are on hold because of poor weather. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
2,000 football banning orders have been issued to England fans ahead of this summer's Euro 2024 tournament in Germany. But authorities think that more than 300,000 England supporters could go to Germany, with Scotland fans, of course, also expected to travel in huge numbers. Well, I'm joined now by GB News' home and security editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. So you went to a press briefing this morning. As I understand, the authorities are gearing up to tackle what they see as a huge wave of potential hooliganism at the tournament. What's the latest?
Well, they're certainly not saying they're expecting hooliganism, and they are preparing for the worst, of course, if it happens, but hoping for the best. They say that in recent tournaments, England fans and, of course, Scotland fans have been pretty well behaved, but there will be very significant numbers attending that tournament, which gets underway in just over 5 weeks' time. That first match is Scotland taking on Germany in Munich, and of course just 2 days later it's England against Serbia near Dortmund. So 300,000 England fans alone they're expecting, because it's so accessible. I spoke earlier to Chief Constable Mark Roberts, who is the national lead for football policing. This is what he told me.
Positive, you know, England fans got a great record at recent tournaments. We know when any number of that people travel, there's always potential for issues, but I think the German authorities are really well prepared. And I think one of the positives, particularly thinking about our fans, Germany's a beer drinking culture, so the police are well aware of dealing with people in the nighttime economy. They deal with plenty of big festivals, so I think we're going to a place that is well suited to work with us to keep everyone safe and make sure there's no issues.
It's 9:30 on Tuesday, the 28th of May. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Hope you had a lovely bank holiday. Thank you for joining us this morning. So, pension protection. Rishi Sunak has pledged to cut income tax for 8 million pensioners by £100 next year and reassures them that he is on their side.
And bringing growth to Britain, more than 120 business leaders have written an open letter backing the Labour Party.
And education for the rich only. It may be. A shocking report shows that 4 in 10 private school pupils will be driven out by Sir Keir Starmer's tax raid, and that will impact everyone's schools.
and burglary crackdown. The Lib Dem leader, Sir Ed Davies, says all burglaries be investigated. Oh dear, how many times have we heard this? If his party comes to power. Well, they're not going to come to power.
And today, he's paddleboarding in Windermere with the local MP, Tim Farron. Oh, that doesn't look very nice, does it? Let's hope it goes better than his attempt at kayaking last year. The metaphors are strong in that
really
footage. Oh, sinking ships, drownings.
I know.
There's a lot we could talk about there.
I'm just thinking, is it 37 days to go to the election? Can we stand it?
We can stand it. I, for one, am enthusiastic about this. I love seeing what they're throwing at all of us now as these policies just keep coming from left, right and centre, don't they? Let us know your thoughts this morning, gbnews.com/your say. We have a packed show today. Don't go anywhere. First, though, Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. The top stories from the GB Newsroom. Pensioners could be in for a tax break worth up to £2.4 billion a year as part of an election pledge by the Conservative Party. It could see cuts worth around £95 in the next tax year, rising to £275 by 2029. The Prime Minister says it'll be funded by a clampdown on tax dodgers, despite recent data showing that staff shortages have led to HMRC answering 22% fewer calls than it did in 2020. Labour described the plan as a desperate move, but Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride told GB News it's part of the government's broader plan.
Want to go still further, and that's where the triple lot plus comes in. And what that means is that we will be uprating not just the pensions by the triple lot, but also what's called the personal allowance. That's the amount that you can earn without paying any income tax, also by that same uprating, by the triple lock uprating. And what that will mean is tax cuts now for pensioners throughout the next Parliament. Labour have completely dismissed this, which basically means that during the next Parliament under Labour, what you're going to be seeing is millions of pensioners being dragged into paying income tax, having to fill all those forms in, all that paperwork and red tape, and extra costs to pensioners.
Meanwhile, the Shadow Chancellor is due to deliver her first major speech of the election campaign. Rachel Reeves is expected to tell business leaders in the East Midlands, including some former Conservative backers, that she'll lead the most pro-growth Treasury in our country's history. That as more than 120 business leaders offer their public support to the Labour Party. In an open letter published by The Times, the leaders say that a new outlook is needed so the UK can break free from a decade of economic stagnation. Some of those who've signed the message include the chef Tom Kerridge and former CEOs of Heathrow, JP Morgan and Aston Martin. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning, 9:34. Stop talking, Andrew Pearce. You're on the telly. This is Britain's Newsroom with me and Andrew this morning until midday.
Well, the Prime Minister has put pensioners at the centre of the general election campaign, so the triple lock will remain, and he's also introducing a mechanism which means the state pension will not be taxed.
So he's calling it the triple lock plus. As Andrew said, it means the state pension would never be subject to income tax. The Prime Minister says it'd be funded by a clampdown on tax dodgers.
Oh, yeah, that magic money tree which Labour has been plundering quite a lot of late.
Well, Labour's Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth said Rishi Sunak is planning to reward Britain's pensioners for their loyalty by stabbing them in the back, just like he did to Boris Johnson and just like he's done to his own MPs. So typically making very little sense, as a lot of politicians are at the moment. Well, joining us now is political commentator Benedict Spence and the former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire. Scarlett, do you understand what he's talking about the fact that he's going to stab pensioners in the back?
Not quite. I mean,
You didn't write that line for them, then?
I did not write that line for him. I mean, I do think that when Rishi Sunak sort of accuses Keir Starmer of naked bids for power and then does this, I mean, you know...
But why wouldn't he make a naked bid for power? He's the leader of the opposition. That's his job. To make a naked bid for power.
Well, precisely.
It's a general election campaign.
And if this isn't a bribe, I don't know what is. I mean, it's... And also, the other thing is the reason is... but I've forgotten what it's called. Benedict will get it right. That because because the income tax thresholds always remain the same. That it hasn't gone up. I mean, that's what it's actually all about.
That's exactly what it's about.
Is that pensions? I mean, they aren't compared. Can I say that compared to the rest of Europe, British pensions are not particularly generous.
Isn't this, Benedict, along with at the weekend this news about national service for young people, it feels like it's just trying to galvanise that grey vote, as it's called, the over 65, 70s votes. That's what they're doing.
Well, that's exactly what this is. And even if that's not with an eye on actually winning the general election, I think it's with an eye on getting away voters from the Reform Party or people who might be tempted to just not come out and vote. It's a way, as you say, to sort of galvanise that cohort, which is very large. It's getting larger every year, and it votes. It votes, far more regularly than younger people do. So it's, as much as I'm not particularly in favour of these policies, it's not the stupidest tactic I've ever heard of.
But it puts the pressure now on Labour, who've already said they will keep the triple lock, which I suspect they didn't want to. They now have to say, will they keep triple lock plus? And look, pensioners who've got a private pension, they'll still be taxed if they're earning a certain amount of money. But it's clever politics, isn't it?
Well, exactly. I mean, this was always going to be the thing, was with such a significant lead in the polls, there was going to have to be some sort of pressure applied to Keir Starmer. And thinking back to when Theresa May called her general election, and she was riding so much higher than Jeremy Corbyn, and actually what did for her was one badly framed policy. How am I going to pay for something? This is how I'm going to pay for it. Nothing necessarily wrong on the face of that, but it, really upset a lot of people because it was an honest...
Like the dementia tax?
Yes, it was an honest attempt to actually fund something, and people went, I don't like the sound of that very much. Whereas obviously here what we're having is Labour saying, cautiously, we're not going to be spending too much. There's no magic money tree, and the Tories going, we're going to do this, this and this. And of course then Labour has to go, oh, well, yes, OK, we'll match you on this. At which point people will then turn around and go, well, hang on a second, I thought there was no magic money tree. Where's it going to come from? And then the Tories will say, same old Labour, they're finding money that doesn't exist.
Bennett's got a point. I mean, Theresa May brought that dementia tax out from nowhere during that election campaign.
Yes.
And that sort of policy, you need to prepare people for it, prepare the ground for it, and it was withdrawn within a week. But the triple lock plus is quite straightforward, and it will be popular with pensioners and people who are about to become pensioners.
Yeah, no, it will, but the question for pensioners is a lot of pensioners have children and grandchildren, and those are people who are not doing very well. And on the other hand, I was reading somewhere that the armed forces, everybody having to do national service, is a great way of making the young vote. I mean, to come out and go, no, this is not what we want anymore.
Yeah.
So actually, I think it's on the one hand, on the other. Will it make that much difference to pensioners? I mean, I think most the pensioners this will make a difference to are the people who only live on their pension, right?
Yeah.
The poor pensioners, right? The rich pensioners, it will still be
like
taxed.
Like the king.
well, like the king, but also like a lot of people with private pensions.
But I think what they've done with these two policies, we'll talk a bit about national service and then the pension. The Tories had such a rocky, terrible start to the campaign. They brought this stuff. I wonder if they brought it forward to get back on the front foot, because at the moment all we're talking about are the Tories. We're not talking about Labour.
Yeah, but we're not talking about them very nicely, are we?
Well, you never talk about them very nicely, Scarlett. It's in your DNA.
But in a way, that's what Labour...
you talk nicely about Labour.
Yeah.
But in a way, that's what Labour want, isn't it? They don't really want us talking about them. They've stayed under the radar. They've stayed under the radar for the last 12 months, not saying anything controversial. Rachel Reeves is talking this morning, and we'll see what she has to say.
So looking forward to that.
Let's talk about this national service initiative that was launched. We haven't been on air since this came out Friday, Saturday. And at first, I had a moment when I thought, oh, brilliant. So this is just kind of priming this next generation. Just prepare yourself that you might have to go to war and something's on the horizon. You look at the detail of it. It is pathetic, Benedict, because it's saying if you get through certain criteria, as in you're not overweight and probably you're fit enough, you can do a year in the military. Which you can do anyway. You can join the TA. You can do a year in the military if you want to anyway. And if you don't want to do that, then you can spend one weekend a month helping your local community. You can do that anyway, and there's going to be no way that this is mandated. What an utterly pointless headline grabber.
It's been very hastily rushed out. I have to say, there are arguments for and against national service, but this has not been framed in a very good way.
This is not national service.
It's not, and we've had mixed messages. Will you go to prison if you don't do it? Will you not? Actually, different people saying different things. This is a very far cry from what they have in Israel or South Korea, for example. example, which if you're trying to spin the idea, as we've had sort of drip-fed to us for a couple of months now, that there aren't enough people for the armed forces, we could be in a land war with Russia, which, let's be clear, it's not going to happen, but that's the sort of thing that we're, being constantly told. This is a sort of a way, I suppose, if you like, of the government turning around to people and saying, OK, well, we can't actually afford to spend everything that we want to on defence, but here's a really good way of convincing people that we are. But there's another aspect to this as well, and that is, of course, because we're talking just then about pensions and the negative response that there has been to, but predominantly from the media and from young people. We're not actually really hearing what the average pensioner thinks because a lot of them aren't on Twitter and they don't write for the Times. But this is about sort of selling an image to these older people. And one of the things, well, two of the things actually that majorly concern them is one, the perceived fecklessness of the young, which is very unfair, and the other is immigration and the idea of a lack of integration. Well, what does this do? It gives young people a purpose, and it also means that we can coalesce around a national identity. What it's doing is it's acknowledging that there are problems around things like youth unemployment, youth mental health, but also immigration. It's saying, yes, these things are a problem, but we're not actually going to give you a solution to that. We're going to give you something that gives the facade of we're attacking it.
I'm taking a slightly different view. If I'd been pitching this policy, and I can smell a policy when it's been rushed out in a hurry, but I would have pitched it more on not the national service, which would only apply to up to 30,000 youngsters, which is a drop in the ocean. A drop in the ocean. I would have emphasised it on the weekend a month, every month, to try and get them more involved in the community, which I think will be applauded by a lot of people. What I can't see, though, is how they're going to enforce it, because if you've got a Saturday and Sunday job, how do you do that weekend voluntary work, and what if they refuse to do the voluntary work? But it's not a bad idea, is it, Scarlett, to try to get people, particularly if they're not in work, not in education, not in training, the so-called NEETs, to get them to get off their backside and do something decent in the community.
Well, I wouldn't say off their backside.
Why not?
Because I think it's really, really tough, actually, being a NEET, right? But I absolutely agree that we have to do something about NEETs. And what they need is skilling. They need something to get them out of the house. They need a reason. I mean, you're absolutely right that this is a half-baked idea. I mean, actually, David Cameron had the big society.
And it's very similar to that.
It lasted about 2 days.
I know, and Gordon Brown talked about it. I mean, it's not a particularly new idea that actually sort of 16 to 18-year-olds should be doing something. And actually, when I was young, a lot of people did VSO. The whole problem is of course, what do you want to do and where?
But you know what else?
Do we do
but you know what else this has done, and it makes me so angry, because I've got 3 teenagers in my house, and do you know what they all said over the weekend? We are now worried that we're going to be sent to war. We've got a teenage mental health problem, and what they've done is they've seen headlines, they've seen TikTok saying national service. So you've just impacted more anxiety on these kids.
That's why they
just
pitched it
throw
the
it
wrong
out.
way.
Yeah, but they just throw it out there without thinking about the implications of this for the mental health of teenagers who are already terrified to go out of their doors every day for all sorts of reasons. So I think it's hideous. But they're not the only party that's not being kind to children, because this private schools tax, Benedict, is also going to punish children. It's going to punish the children of parents who are working hard to send their children to private school because they can no longer afford it after this. And it's going to punish the children in the state system because we might have 155,000 children going into the state system from January.
Well, exactly.
Great job.
It's destruction for the sake of destruction. And there's this idea that what it'll do is it'll target the super rich, or the super rich will pay their way.
It won't.
The super rich don't care, for a start, about that sort of money.
Is this going to impact on Eton admissions?
Not at all. And it must be said,
except for the bursaries.
There's a sort of a hilarity about this, which, at the one hand, we've got people saying about, private schools, public schools, you have to, charge this levy on them, you have to make them pay VAT, which, by the way, would make us unique in Europe for actually charging VAT on that form of education. Nobody else thinks it's a good idea, nobody else does it. But at the same time, you're saying you can destroy, part of the fabric of our education system because it's private schools. But third-rate universities, they absolutely have to be protected. There can be no suggestion about letting universities go to the wall or anything like that. And so we've got this sort of double standard where, on the one hand, you've got higher education must be protected at all costs. Doesn't matter how much debt, young people accrue, how much it's used by third-rate universities effectively as a visa factory to, bring in overseas students who can then stay and work. But actually, this part of our education system that does work really well. And I know people say that it's unfair. I'm sorry, I understand that it is, but actually our society relies on it very much so. But that's just how it is.
Let's hear Scarlett Maguire put on her cap, green cap, of envy, because this is politics of envy. It is the worst sort of politics of envy.
Can I say that there are a lot of really, really good state schools? We do not rely...
Not enough.
We do not... there are masses of really good state schools. We do not rely on private schools to keep Britain together. And it's actually boringly well known that if you're at university, right, that it's the state school kids that get the top grades. I mean, that's just
empirically not true.
It is empirically.
Let me tell you what happens with this issue, Scarlett.
But
you look in the eyes.
To...
If you look in the eyes of the Labour politicians who are talking about this, you see their mask slip.
Oh,
there's a lot of things that Bev Phillips says that I like enormously. Hang on, I like a lot of what she says about education, and then you see her talking about this, and you can just see that smug satisfaction that the hard-working doctors and teachers and lawyers... Fine, that's absolutely irrelevant. Don't make it personal.
Just to
remind
just to remind me, she's the Shadow Education Secretary.
She is the Shadow Education Secretary, and what this is about is saying that we're no longer going to give tax breaks to private schools because they're businesses, right?
But that's not for the. But it's not. But it's a tax break. It's on the parents. It's not the owners of those schools.
No, because actually. Private schools have been putting up their fees way above inflation, right, for the last 10, 15 years. And it's barely affected how... I mean, most middle-class parents can no longer afford to send their kids to private school. So actually...
no chance now.
And what they don't have to put it all on the fees, right? I mean, state schools have been managing with smaller and smaller budgets. Private schools can actually start managing it as well.
But that's
instead of putting it on their fees.
That's not what's going to happen, Scarlett. That's not what's going to happen.
That will happen.
What's going to happen is you're going to have...
The bursaries will stop.
You're going to have private schools are going to close down.
Yeah,
and all of these kids are going to have to go into the state system. It takes a long time to build a state school. It's not the kind of thing you can do overnight, and there's no provision for it. And what's the ideology behind it? The ideology behind it is we are going to penalise hard-working people.
No, we are not penalising hard-working people. There are an awful lot of hard-working people who send their kids to state schools, and what we want to do is we want to put the money into the state schools where 93% of the children in this country go.
Whilst punishing the children who are at private school. And a lot of those children, those fees are supported by pensioners and grandparents.
We are going to have to...
We've got to go for a quick break.
Benedict Spence, Scarlett McGrath, I'm sure there'll be more of this. Coming up, we talk about the dreadful Carol Vorderman, who says she was pushed out of the BBC because she wasn't allowed to have her opinions. You work for the BBC, dear.
Don't go.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Well, Welsh farmer Gareth Wyn-Jones is a first-language Welsh speaker and joins us now. Gareth, I mean, a lot of people will be thinking, hang on, this guy is a Welsh teacher. He speaks English. He knew what was on the parking ticket. He's just trying to make a point. He's being a prat, isn't he?
No, hey, come on, mate. I'm a first language Welsh. It's important that we watch after our language and, you know, that everything's bilingual. For us in Wales, you wouldn't go to France and expect your ticket to be in English, would you? You know, English is the most spoken language, but let's watch after these small languages. It's part of our cultural. So, you know, I take my hat off to the guy. Fair play to him for go out and to fight this. But what it's done is put it onto the mainstream media, and you're talking about it, even that you're calling them that. You know, at least we're having a discussion about it, and it's putting the Welsh language in the forefront. And, so, you know, Gareth, speaking Welsh is important.
Yeah, so Gareth, this is a matter of principle. Is there a sense that the Welsh language is being eradicated in Wales? Is this something that the Welsh people need to rise up against?
Well, Welsh Government are trying to, you know, bring a lot more Welsh speaking into our daily life and teach people how to speak Welsh. Well, everything should be bilingual then. And I think, you know, it should start with government. So government should be putting pressure on these companies to make sure everything is bilingual. So I get behind this guy. Fair play to him. It's a good stance, and it puts it in the public eye. Let's have everything in both languages especially Welsh, because that's my first language. And I'm
You know
not
what?
Fran-
If I was Welsh, I think I would agree with you. I think I would agree with you, Gareth.
It depends if you come from Wrexham.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
TV and radio presenter Carol Vorderman, she's whinging about what she calls Tories at the top of the BBC. I don't remember seeing any of those. Who got rid of her?
Carol Vorderman, of course, now presents on a commercial radio station. As she says, she's absolutely loving the freedom and that the BBC's social media guidelines try to restrict people's private lives.
So the former BBC executive and presenter Roger Bolton joins us. Roger, I thought she would have understood when you work at the BBC presenting a show as she was on Radio Wales, whether it's Radio Wales or Radio 1, it is important that presenters are impartial. Now, I appreciate Gary Lineker takes no notice of that edict, but she, I thought, would understand it.
We would have thought so. By the way, there are Tories at the top of the BBC. The Director General is a former Conservative candidate, I think, and was on the council, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, but he's a minority. Let's be honest, Roger. Tim Davie is not typical of the mindset of most people at the BBC.
That is certainly your view. Now, as regards Carol Vorderman, I mean, yes, she should have known. I mean, this is very difficult. You know, if the BBC gets rid of Carol Vorderman, it's down for stopping free speech. If it doesn't, and it lets her speak and whatever, it gets down for being left-wing and so on. So it's tried to produce guidelines which say that people in news and current affairs shouldn't express their views at all. And also people presenting major shows, Match of the Day, people who appear to be speaking, you know, the figureheads of the BBC, they shouldn't either. But on the other hand, there is a real issue here about freedom of speech. If you've got somebody who's a freelance broadcaster who's doing lots of other things, are they to be silent in the rest of their life because they present a programme on the BBC? So it's difficult. It's a difficult area. But I mean, I think what Carol is clearly a campaigner. And fine, she's good. Maybe she should come on your show and present one of your programmes. But she's got a book coming out in the autumn, which is called Out of Order, What's Gone Wrong with Britain, and One Woman's Mission to Fix It. Well, fine, but she can't pretend she's not participating in the political debate, can she?
And you can't. And the point is, Roger, you can't have it both ways if you're on the BBC. It's a very special and unique position to be on the BBC, funded by the licence payer, i.e. the taxpayer.
Well, it is, but as I tried to say, free speech is a real issue, which I know you care about genuinely. So you can't say because Andrew Pearce is now going to be given a job in the BBC 1 day a week, he should shut up for 6 days a week, or the same with you, Deb. It's a really difficult issue. But on the other hand, well, I mean, you know, ask them. They're a bit short, some talent in some areas, in my view. But anyway, but if you're in current affairs, of course, on news, you shouldn't. And so it's in that difficult area. Social media has presented a raft of problems that nobody thought of 20, 30 years ago.
But do you think, Roger, so do you think that if you're, say, an entertainment presenter on the BBC or a sports presenter on the BBC, you should be held to different standards in terms of what you can and can't say on social media than the news team?
I think so. Although I think if you're something like Gary Lineker, where you're there every week and people do see you, even though you do other things and work for other broadcasters, as the face of the BBC, then you've got to be concerned about the way people will regard the BBC. You're not helping the BBC if people look at you and think, oh, well, you're a lefty or right, or whatever you are, and therefore you're typical of the BBC. You know, the BBC's hard enough job in the present climate to persuade people that it tries to be as objective as possible. So I think those people who are paid a lot of money by the BBC ought to bear that in mind. Equally, it would be a monstrous invasion of free speech if because you, as I said, or even me, unlikely, were employed 1 day a week for the BBC, we had to shut up about everything for 6 days. Because we
couldn't shut up for 6 hours, Roger.
No, but she's quite funny, you know.
No, I was talking about Bev.
I've always liked Carol Vorderman. Before this, I thought, you know what, she's a strong woman, she's a smart woman, she's pushed her way forward in life, she's done very, very well, she's reinvented on occasions. My particular issue with Carol Vorderman is she kept quiet during a time in which celebrities balancing the narrative were very much needed, and I mean during the pandemic. She kept her head down, she towed the narrative line, she didn't ever upset anybody, and then suddenly she's now coming out and criticising Sunak, criticising everyone during the pandemic. And I'm like, where were you for those 2 years? You just very much did what the establishment, capital E, wanted, and she's doing the same again now because she's teeing herself up for a job in the Labour Party.
Well, there are lots of establishments around, aren't there? You may probably part of one. You have the privilege of broadcasting, so you're part of the broadcasting establishment. Listen, I'll have a bet with you. In 2 years' time, I bet you, before then probably, but in 2 years' time, Carol Vorderman will be attacking the next government, which is probably going to be Labour, very hard indeed. So in 2 years' time, if I'm still around, ask me back and let's check.
OK, all right, Roger, thank you so much. She blocked me on Twitter recently, Carol Vorderman,
well, that's
for some reason.
I've had my Twitter account hacked, by the way, because so if you do follow me on Twitter, I am not, as it suggests on Twitter, now saying Andrew Pearce has seen the light and is urging people to vote Labour, because I'm not urging people to vote Labour.
I shouldn't laugh.
Au contraire.
I shouldn't laugh.
My Twitter feed will be back soon, but not just yet.
So you were hacked.
I was.
You were scammed.
Yeah.
And the first thing they did once they got into Andrew's X or Twitter account was to say, vote Labour, everybody.
And I can tell you, Keir Starmer will be furious because he won't want people thinking, God, Keir Starmer sold out so much. Even Andrew Pearce now supports him. So I don't. Now, we must read this statement from the BBC, La Vorderman. The BBC published its new social media guidelines in September, which strike a balance between the Beeb's commitment to impartiality and freedom of expression.
They go on to say the guidance sets out clear expectations for freelancers, which includes a particular responsibility to uphold civility in public discourse.
Well, let's go to our panel. We've got Piers Pottinger, who's masterminded many Tory election campaigns, and our veteran here, Nigel. What's your name?
Whatever I am.
Nigel.
Talking of Nigels, can we just say we're waiting, aren't we?
For Nigel, because Nigel Farage is making a speech, and Rachel Reed is making a speech. Piers, you've worked with Thatcher and Major and all sorts. Marks out of 10 so far for the Tory campaign after that incredibly wobbly start, singing in the rain, as we talked about the other day.
Well, I think it's very interesting because I think some of the policy announcements have been really rather effective.
Right.
And it shows that the Conservatives have finally woken up to what the voters want, which is the end of wokery. But unfortunately, Rishi's still going around the country trying to connect with the people, which he's not very good at. And he does seem terribly on his own. There don't seem to be a lot of other figures in the Conservative. Well, they're mostly standing down at the next election. And I think it's a bit of both. But the point is that when they're making these punchy, detailed announcements, unlike Starmer, who yesterday we got at Lancing, which is most famous for Lancing College, rather ironically, as someone who wants to basically crucify the public school sector. And Starmer did his I'm just a poor boy from a poor family Bohemian Rhapsody or Lancing Rhapsody routine. And there's no substance. And he keeps saying, I want to, and he produces all these utopian things like everyone's going to have an excellent teacher, we're going to save the NHS. But he hasn't explained how. And I think he is actually looking weaker and weaker. And if Rishi is good at anything, it is arguing intelligently about policy. So I think these television debates, normally I'm not in favour of television debates in an election. I believe in the value of genuine democracy. Elections shouldn't normally be decided by big debates as in America. But I think if Starmer dares to be properly face-to-face with Rishi in a public, on television, in a public debate about the real policies, and Rishi will do very well indeed. What he's not good at is sitting around in pubs, sort of
trying to be man of the people.
Rubbing shoulders with people.
What mark out of 10 would you give the Tory campaign so far?
I'd give it 0 in terms of some aspects and 10 in terms of others, because some of the announcements have been punchy. They've wrong-footed the Labour Party completely. The National Service one came right out of the blue, and it has actually proved much more popular than people thought.
I think it would have been better if they'd pitched more of it on the kids doing voluntary work at weekend.
Absolutely.
Nigel, Terrible start in the rain. We don't need to talk about that. But would you assess Labour's campaign? Is it what we call the Ming vase strategy? He's walking on with a Ming vase. Got to be really careful, really cautious in case he drops it, which is why he's not saying anything interesting.
Well,
just steady as she goes and hope the Tories are so far behind.
I think there have been interesting things, but when you're talking about marks, I think I would give the Tories two, rather more than Piers would, for their campaign. Labour a 6 or a 7, which will go up when we get to the detail of economic policy. That's
Will we
the
get
area.
detail?
Well, we should do in the manifesto. So at the moment, I think that
haven't they announced it all already?
Well, no, they haven't. They haven't really announced it all already. I mean, I think you need some detail around Great British Energy, how that will improve growth, the fact they've
how much it's going to cost.
Well, we know it's going to cost $8 billion for the actual company, but there'll be private investment in that. Bear in mind they've lost the $28 billion that they were going to invest in it, and so he's going to have to explain how you get to the various bits, doubling onshore wind, tripling solar, quadrupling offshore wind, how he will get there without that money. I'd expect to see that in the manifesto.
What do you make of this private school tax policy, Nigel, in terms of what it tells us about the Labour Party's ideology?
Well, if it comes to an ideological thing, I think people have the right to spend their money as they choose. I don't think that the taxpayer should be subsidising that choice. So that's the ideology out of the way.
But hang on, but that doesn't quite explain it, because at the moment, the private school parents are subsidising the state system by taking their children out of it.
Yes, but they're also making a choice to actually put their kids in private school, and that choice is being subsidised by the general taxpayer. So,
Robert, so it's the other way around. It's not in the same way that private healthcare takes the pressure off the NHS.
Yeah.
Private schools have taken the pressure off the state.
Private healthcare is another one. I don't object to people actually having private healthcare, but that is not subsidised by the taxpayer.
Right. Piers, what do you make of the policy? Because I think Labour thought it was a huge vote winner. We've seen the front page of the Mail today.
No,
actually,
I think
hang on, we're going to come back to you. We're going live to Dover because Nigel Farage is speaking.
This is like the launch of it's a Reform press conference. Nigel Farage, here he is.
That you might as well put a big sign on the White Cliffs of Dover saying everyone welcome, because we'd stopped deporting people who'd arrived in our country illegally. And it's quite a thought that in the last year of the Labour government, leading up to 2010, 45,000 people who came to Britain illegally had been deported. But we'd given up on that. So I said that I thought, unless something dramatic was done, that there would be an invasion. Now, of course, for using that word, I was called all the names under the sun. But 3,800 boats later, 125,000 people later, you can use whatever word you want. I happen to think that invasion, frankly, was pretty appropriate. So I've campaigned hard on this issue throughout this 4-year period, and I'm going to say to you, frankly, I was ahead of the curve on this. I was right. And that's kind of what I've done in my career. I'm an issues campaigner, above all. So nobody was talking about it when I started, but you're all talking about it now. And it's worth bearing in mind that 86% of those that come are male, and nearly all of them under the age of 40, most under the age of 30. Unsurprisingly, it's led to a very big national debate. People see the unfairness of it. They say, how can it be that we're on social housing waiting lists for a year, perhaps 2 years, when these people that come illegally are put straight into 4-star hotels, or, if not that, private accommodation? How can it be that those that come have access to dental care when we can't get an NHS dentist? And I think the fact that the hotels alone are costing over £7 million a day makes people pretty upset. Those that have come into the country legally aren't very happy about it either, because they've gone through costs, time and hoops to be in the country the right way. But it's the other element of this that I want to focus on today. Frankly, I think this is very dangerous. You only have to look at what's happened in Sweden, in cities like Malmö, to see that a large influx of young males coming from an entirely different culture, and certainly coming from a culture in which women are not even regarded as second-class citizens, has had, frankly, disastrous social effects. But since the events of October the 7th and what has happened in Gaza and increased radicalisation in the Middle East, this is even more of a problem. You see, these young men that come, and I've actually filmed this, I've filmed on the 12-mile median line, people throwing their iPhones into the sea, throwing their passports into the sea, doing everything they can so that we can't track and identify them. Although it's okay, because they get an iPhone, a new one, within 24 hours of arrival. But I think this is a national security issue. Now, if you think I'm being over the top, let's have a think about our friend Donald Tusk, who I did battle with in the European Parliament many times, very much an EU lovey, now, of course, the Prime Minister of Poland. He has talked about the wave of, and I'm using his words, not mine, aggressive young males that are coming into Poland, having crossed the Mediterranean, and he has said that this is now a matter of national security for Poland. Well, I put it to you that if it's a matter of national security in Poland, I think what we ought to be doing with this situation here is declaring a national security emergency. And this is an emergency. I talked over the course of the weekend to Trevor Phillips about the small but worryingly growing number of young men, predominantly young men, in this country, adopting radical views, views that aren't just un-British, but views that, frankly, are extremely anti-British. We saw the recent local elections, candidates being elected in inner-city districts, in Leeds, in Burnley, and elsewhere. We saw the aggression. And you might have noticed that Angela Rayner yesterday was campaigning in her constituency, begging a group of Muslim leaders to please vote Labour. You'll have noticed not a single woman in the room. So we're moving into an age in our inner cities and towns, I'm afraid, I'm worried to say, of sectarian politics with women completely excluded. I have to say that the Rwanda policy is something that was plucked out of the air by a desperate Conservative government, launched just down the coast at Lid Airport 2 years and 1 month ago. And Rishi Sunak, of course, has inherited that from Boris Johnson and keeps making promises that planes will go to Rwanda. I am absolutely convinced that the overriding reason for calling a snap early general election is because he knows those planes in July, as he promised, would not be going to Rwanda. They weren't going to go. Rishi can't stop the boats. And he can't stop the boats for the very same reason that the first aeroplane that was on the tarmac and ready to go was stopped, if you remember, by a judgment from a single so-called judge. I say so-called because most of the judges in the European Court of Human Rights haven't actually been legally trained. They're jurists, which is a very odd European concept, at least to us. And he knows that it won't happen. He knows that despite everything that they put in the legislation which disapplies Articles 2 and 3 of the Human Rights Act 1998, he knows that an international treaty goes over, above and beyond that. And planes not going to Rwanda would see the failure of what he believes to be his flagship policy. And that's where the other R comes in. That's where the reform vote, he feared, would have gone a lot higher. So I genuinely believe that's the reason why we've got this early general election. The Conservative policy on Rwanda does not work. We are, I'm afraid, in a situation where our leaders do not have courage to do different. As for the Labour policy, well, frankly, it is a joke. They haven't got a policy. They say get tough on the criminal gangs. We've been saying for decades in this country we would get tough on the criminal drugs gangs. But has that made any difference to the supply of illegal substances? Far from it. In fact, they're being consumed today by more people and in greater quantities than ever before. Those gangs over there on the other side, and we're talking about some very ruthless people, some very dangerous people, those gangs on the other side can make 2 to 3 million euros a week during the months of June, July, August, September if we get a clear spell of
So this is Nigel Farage you're listening to. Of course, he's honorary president of Reform UK, speaking in Dover. Of course, he's not running. And we're going to see Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, she's speaking too. So they're all out and about today. But we're going to stick with Nigel Farage, of course.
Looks like they've got the same branding, haven't they?
Yeah, who isn't, of course, Farage running for office at all. He's decided not to do that. Didn't he, in a statement, talk about how important it was that he engaged with America?
Yeah. Right, we're going to go back to Farage and we will go and hear what Rachel Reeves has to say in just a moment.
Whether you agree with it or not, it was about restoring sovereignty. It was about being in control. And there is no doubt that the issue that pushed the turnout up in 2016 to numbers that nobody anticipated was the issue of immigration. Mostly, actually, legal immigration, but we'll talk much more about that later on this week. To Brexit voters, what is happening in the English Channel is a serious affront. And they see, frankly, us allowing it to continue as being a betrayal of what they voted for in the referendum.
So, from Nigel Farage, we will look at what he said later, but here's Rachel Reeves.
We can't hear her.
Is today the natural party of British business. And I want to set out the central economic fault line in this election, the choice before the British people on the 4th of July. 5 more years of chaos with the Conservative Party leaving working people worse off, or stability with a changed Labour Party. I can tell you exactly what Rishi Sunak wants you to think on polling day. He's already saying it. That the plan is working, don't change course now. That the chaos and instability wrought by Liz Truss was just a blip. That the deep problems that we face are down to global events. They're not his fault at all. Don't judge 14 years on 49 days, he will say. I want to take that head on. Because while it is true that the crises we have faced are global in origin, our unique exposure to those crises, the reason that we have been harder hit than many comparable countries by the economic impact of COVID and then by inflation and rising energy prices, can only be explained by the choices made by Conservative governments here at home. And because while the Prime Minister wants this election to be about whether inflation is coming down this month, he omits to mention when it started to rise, on his watch as Chancellor. Even before the Conservatives, in their clamour to cut taxes for those at the very top, sent interest rates and mortgage costs spiralling. He omits to mention when it peaked too, on his watch as Prime Minister. And he omits to mention the families and the businesses dealing with the consequences of Conservative economic mismanagement today. Like the family I met in Redcar, the dad doing an apprenticeship, the mum working in a supermarket, who spend every evening talking about money because there's simply not enough to pay the bills. Or the small business owner in Milton Keynes, desperate to expand, but faced with a system of business rates that are stacked against her. Or just down the road from here, the workers at Alstom, some of whom I met just a few months ago, who are facing the uncertainty that results when a government is unwilling to take a long-term strategic approach in partnership with business and trade unions, the only responsible approach to economic policy. The Conservatives are insulting the intelligence of millions of people like these, forced to deal with the consequences of their failure. But we won't let them get away with it, because the Conservatives do deserve to be judged on their record of those 14 years. The general election in 5 weeks' time is a chance for the British people to pass judgment on 14 years of economic chaos and decline under the Conservative Party. 14 years that have seen taxes reach a 70-year high. National debt more than double. And the typical homeowner remortgaging this year paying £240 more a month after the disastrous mini-budget. Wages flat. Public services on their knees. Taxpayers being asked to pay more and more, and yet getting less and less in return. 5 prime ministers, 7 chancellors, 12 plans for growth, each delivering less than the last. To put it in perspective, if our economy had have grown at the average rate of OECD countries these last 14 years, our economy today would be £150 billion larger, worth £5,000 for every household, and providing £55 billion more investment for our public services. That is their record, and they deserve to be judged on it. The Conservatives have failed on the economy. The plan isn't working. And Rishi Sunak's decision to call a snap general election is the clearest sign of that. If he doesn't believe that his plan is working, why should you? And no matter how much they tell us that Liz Truss was nothing to do with them, their every action speaks otherwise. They haven't learned their lessons. They're singing from the same songbook. With the Prime Minister's priorities dissolving into thin air, what is his last desperate throw of the dice? Not to deliver on the promises that he's made over the last 2 years, but instead to offer up £64 billion worth of unfunded tax cuts. They offered up just another one last night, and the Conservatives cannot say how they're going to pay for them. What cuts will they make to public services? What other taxes will they increase? Or will they fund it through yet more government borrowing? And why should anyone believe them after, and I'll say it again, the tax burden has reached a 70-year high under the Conservatives? Be in no doubt, the single biggest risk to our economy today is 5 more years of Conservative chaos and decline. My ambitions for Britain are so much greater than that. I don't think we need fantasy economics to look and hope for a better future. Just look around us. But we do need change. Under Keir's leadership, we have changed the Labour Party so that we might have the chance to change our country for the better. To offer a government that is pro-worker and pro-business, in the knowledge that each depends upon the success of the other. A party that understands business, that works with business. I'm not one of those politicians that thinks that the private sector is a dirty word or a necessary evil. I worked in the private sector. Before entering politics, I worked in financial services in West Yorkshire. I know what a successful business can do for places like those. And I know that economic growth comes from success of business, large, medium and small. Indeed, there is no other way. I'm not talking about the old trickle-down free market dogma of the past, but instead a new spirit of partnership between government and business, an approach fit for a more uncertain world. I know that there is no policy that I can announce, no plan that can be drawn up in Whitehall that cannot be improved through engagement with business. And our manifesto will bear the imprint of that engagement. I want to lead the most pro-growth, the most pro-business Treasury that our country has ever seen, with a laser focus on delivering for working people. Today, more than 120 senior business leaders have signed a letter expressing their support for a Labour government. Across the world of business, Labour is being recognised as the natural partner of business, the party of growth and the party of enterprise. A few years ago, you might not have expected to have heard these things from the Labour Party. Think how far we have come under Keir's leadership in 4 short years. if we can change this party to bring it back in the service of working people, if we can return it to the centre ground of politics, if we can bring business back to Labour, then I know that we can bring business back to Britain, to bring investment back to Britain, to bring growth back to Britain, to bring hope back to Britain. Because by bringing business back to Britain, we can deliver a better future for working people. Whatever ideologues on the left or the right say, it's not either or. This Labour Party understands that business success is crucial to good jobs, and good work is crucial for successful businesses. It is by bringing business back to Britain that we can create good jobs that pay a decent wage, bring in investment to build strong communities with thriving high streets, to put more money in people's pockets, and take pride in goods and services made here in Britain but exported around the world. Our plans for growth are built on partnership with business. A mission-led government prepared to take on the big challenges that we face and ready to seize the opportunities of the future. And a government that will build all its plans for the future on the bedrock of economic stability. It is clearer than ever that at this election, the choice is between Tory chaos and Labour stability. And stability is change. Stability so that we never again see a repeat of the mini-budget and the damage it did to families. Stability so that families and business can plan for the future. Stability of direction so we can bring together government, business and working people in common purpose to meet the great challenges of our time. That will be underpinned by robust fiscal rules to get debt falling by the end of the Parliament. I will never play fast and loose with the public finances, because when you do so, you put family finances at risk. We have started as we mean to go on. I have been very clear that every policy that we announce, every line in our manifesto, will be fully costed and fully funded. No ifs, no ands, no buts. That is the attitude that I will take into the Treasury, because taxpayers' money should be spent with the same care with which people spend their own money. I remember when I was growing up, my mum would sit at the kitchen table, combing over line by line her bank statements and her receipts. We weren't badly off, but we didn't have money to spare. To my mum, every penny mattered. And believe me, I understand that the basic test for whoever is Chancellor is to bring that attitude to our public finances. And stability will rest, as it always has done when Britain has enjoyed economic success, on strong institutions. I started my career as an economist at the Bank of England. I know why the stability that it brings and the independence from short-term politics matter to economic success and the battle against inflation. So Labour will not play, I will not play, the Tory game of undermining the Treasury or the Bank of England. And I will introduce a new fiscal lock so that any government making significant and permanent changes to tax and spending will be subject to a forecast from the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility, so that there is never a repeat of the mini-budget. Stability must mean something else too, and it's something that I've heard from business time and again about how important this is. Certainty in our tax system, which is why we have committed to the publication of a business tax roadmap covering the duration of the Parliament within the first 6 months of a Labour government. And it is why corporation tax will be capped at its current rate for the duration of the next Parliament. That is the lowest rate among G7 economies, and should our competitiveness come under threat, we will act. Stability will be the bedrock of everything that we do. But stability alone is not enough. It is one central part of what I call securonomics, a new approach which recognises that our age of insecurity requires new answers to new economic challenges. So stability must stand alongside a plan to fix our weak levels of investment. Britain today is the only G7 country with investment below 20% of GDP. I am not under the illusion that government can fix this alone. The lifeblood of a successful economy is business investment. So investment will be delivered through a new partnership between government and business, embodied in a new industrial strategy and in a new national wealth fund, with government investing to crowd in tens of billions of pounds of private investment, to create the jobs of the future, drive down bills and achieve energy independence for Britain. And we will need reform too. No more ducking the difficult decisions. No more shrinking from vested interests. No more accepting that this is as good as it gets. So we will reform our politics, pushing power out of Westminster so our local and regional leaders can deliver for their areas. We will reform our skills system to give working people the chance to succeed in a changing world of work, replacing the apprenticeship levy with a new jobs and growth levy. We will reform our planning system, taking head-on the biggest obstacle to growth and investment that we face, and get Britain building again. We will deliver reform with security in work, with a new deal for working people. And we will forge a closer relationship with our nearest neighbours in the European Union to ease the burden of bureaucracy and red tape on British businesses, including a new veterinary agreement, an agreement on touring visas, and the mutual recognition of professional qualifications. Stability, investment, reform. You are going to hear those three words a lot from me, because they are the ingredients of a genuine plan for the future, an alternative to managed decline. The reason that I can say with confidence that this Labour Party is the natural party of British business. The choice at the next election is simple. 5 more years of the vicious cycle of chaos and decline which the Conservatives have set in motion, or a changed Labour Party, putting stability first, in the service of working people. We will fight this election on the economy. Every day we will expose the damage that the Conservatives have done, and the further damage that they threaten to do. And we will set out Labour's alternative. 5 missions for a decade of national renewal, and 6 first steps to point the way to a better Britain. Cutting NHS waiting times with 40,000 new appointments every single week. Launching a new border security command to smash the criminal gangs and to strengthen our borders. Setting up Great British Energy, a new publicly owned clean power company. Cracking down on antisocial behaviour, recruiting 6,500 new teachers. All fully costed, all fully funded. And all those ambitions built on the bedrock of economic stability, the foundation stones for a decade of national renewal. To serve as Chancellor of the Exchequer would be the privilege of my life. Not to luxuriate in status, not as a staging post in a career, but to serve. I know the responsibility that will come with that. I embrace it. I know that it will not be easy. It will take hard work. It will require harder choices. I am ready for it. As I travel around the country, I see great potential wherever I go. in dynamic great British businesses like this one, in labs and classrooms in our world-leading universities, and in the talent and the effort of working people. It is time to unlock that potential, to turn the page on chaos and decline, and start a new chapter for Britain. Labour is ready. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to take a few questions from the media now. The first question is from Faisal Islam from the BBC.
Thanks, Shadow Chancellor. Do you don't seem to want to match the Conservative triple lock plus policy, so it's possible that pensioners under a Labour government on the basic state pension would have to pay tax. Is that because you think it's a bad idea, or you'd like to do it and we don't have the money? And could there be an emergency budget if you win before the summer?
Well, thank you very much for that question, Faisal. Labour are absolutely committed to the triple lock for pensioners, to give them that security that the basic state pension will continue to rise by whatever is greatest out of inflation, average earnings, or 2.5%, and we give that commitment. But today is just another desperate gimmick from the Conservatives. Even before today, they had racked up £64 billion of unfunded tax cuts, and last night they offered us another one. The only reason that pensioners are looking for the first time at paying income tax on their basic state pension is because the Conservatives lost control of the economy.
So we're fading out Rachel Reeves. We're trying to stay awake. Nigel Nelson, Piers Pottage, still with us. Nigel, you've been a veteran of Labour speeches. She had 20 minutes. She didn't tell me a single new thing that she would do as Chancellor of the Exchequer.
I think you're right, but there were no facts in there.
It was
what she's doing, I mean, this was the kind of speech where she needs to appeal to business.
Yeah.
That's the thing that she was trying to do today, and to repeat mantras. I mean, this is something we're all going to get fed up with during the election campaign. So we keep hearing the same phrases. She won't play fast and loose with the economy. The new phrase that bringing business back to Labour brings business back to Britain. Good slogan. They'll keep hammering that one home. I think we have to excuse politicians for doing that during an election because that's the way they all do it. I mean, this is not a particular Labour thing. This can be the Tories do exactly the same thing. We'll constantly hear the plan is working routine from them. So it is just something that happens. We might all get a little bit bored in the next couple of weeks.
Bored in the next couple of weeks? I was bored 10 minutes into the speech, Nigel. And this is our job.
And our inbox is... I was watching the comments from you at home. Thank you for getting involved. If there's any of you still watching, frankly, after listening to that, then applause for sticking with us, because so many people, Piers, saying they just are frustrated about, as these two are saying then, the lack of detail, the lack of information.
Well, they're scared because if they give too much detail away, people won't vote for them. The most significant mention in her whole speech was one small mention of the trade unions. Now, of course, it's the trade unions who sit on 13 members of trade unions sit on the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party, and that is the body that actually comes up with the policy and will have to approve the manifesto if they ever produce one of any significance. And, it's the likes of Mick Lynch and his mob who will be running this country if the Labour Party get in. Rachel Reeves' job is to stand there pretending she loves business, everything's going to be fine, it's going to be... She keeps using, we're going to use stability to do things. I'm sorry, it's
doesn't make any word salad.
Gobbledygook nonsense. And I mean, it really was so unimpressive and so dull that it does give Rishi hope. I mean, as I've said many times, I don't think Rishi's run a good job, has really great political judgment. I don't think he's a good leader of the party, but he's an intelligent man, and he's certainly far more capable of running this economy than Rachel Reeves ever will be. And as that ridiculously long, boring, tedious speech showed, no one is interested, and even Nigel admits it was dull as ditchwater.
And Nigel, isn't that mistake... Look, we remember Theresa May. She went into that campaign 22 points ahead, 23 points ahead. Now, people didn't want an election. We didn't need it. It was 2 years after the last one. But in my view, she surrendered that lead because they spent 5 weeks hiding her away. She had nothing interesting to say. They decided they were so far ahead, don't rock the boat, be completely risk-averse. She kept repeating same old phrases like strong and stable. You've already... what is no more 14 years of Tory chaos. Isn't the risk... Piers makes, that actually people will start looking at someone thinking, he's boring, he's got nothing to say?
Well, there's always the risk of that, and that's what I mean about, I think that you kind of get a bit of excitement at the beginning of a campaign, it then tails off in the middle of it, and people are just saying, well, we've got a bit fed up with this, and then really takes off for the last couple of weeks. So I think you'll see that. But I mean, when you look at what Theresa May was doing, you're absolutely right. She was hammering home the same slogans all the time, and it's just what they do. That's the way. I mean, I think that they shouldn't. I think they should be a bit more original about it.
The public are cleverer than the politicians give them credit for. They saw through it.
Well, they did. I mean, also, the dementia tax didn't help.
Sure.
It didn't help hugely that they came up with an absolutely astonishingly lousy manifesto in 2017. And conversely, we got a much better than expected manifesto from Jeremy Corbyn. Yeah. So there were a whole host of factors around there. And had things gone on a bit longer, she could have actually lost.
She would have lost.
Starmer and his mob really want to happen is to convince the British public to sleepwalk into a nightmare into this election, foolishly believing these platitudes we're getting, where underneath, and we've already seen it with the public schools tax, I mean, underneath this veneer of we're lovely, friendly, we love everyone, we're great for business, all this rubbish, underneath they're old-fashioned socialists at heart. Don't forget, Starmer has not ever revoked his old Marxist beliefs, and he is the man who said Jeremy Corbyn would make a wonderful Prime Minister.
Well, he said that he was a socialist.
And he said today he's a socialist, and remember, socialism...
He said, I am a socialist.
Defining socialist belief, sharing ownership of the means of production equally would increase people's quality. Socialists want to give people free access to basic life necessities like food. You can have free food under Keir Starmer.
But he also said on television last night, he said, I'm a socialist, and then paused and said, a progressive, as if he immediately didn't want to upset people.
But you see, our viewers and our listeners are so smart, because when Rachel Reeves said then she wants to encompass a new spirit of partnership with business, our viewers say, what kind of business? Are you talking about the community? Are you talking about corporations?
Yeah.
She doesn't talk about small businesses, Nigel.
We've got to go back to press conference because our very own Chris Hope is about to speak to the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. Let's have a listen.
People and look at the aspirations and the vision that I set out today and Keir set out in his speech yesterday. Christopher Hope from GBNews.
Thank you, Shadow Chancellor. So you're not a socialist. Are you relaxed about company bosses getting very rich?
I want businesses to be successful, and that includes paying people at the top properly for the work that they do. But I'm also committed to turn the minimum wage into a real living wage so that ordinary working people also benefit when the economy grows and is successful. And it's why our new deal for working people will also give to working people the security that should come and the dignity that should come from working hard, but for too many people doesn't exist today.
Well, of course, Piers, remember Peter Mandelson, when he was advising Gordon Brown, he said he was intensely relaxed about people getting disgustingly rich. So, wasn't that the quote? Disgustingly rich?
But I can't remember.
I think he did say that. But, I mean, this business of leaders, I mean, I must mention this letter of 120 so-called business leaders. There isn't one of the FTSE 100 CEOs in that list. They highlight Tom Kerridge, who's a moderately successful chef with a handful of restaurants. They also include the former CEO of Heathrow, John Holland Kay, who many holiday makers will remember the misery he was responsible for at Heathrow. And now he's left as chief executive. What's he doing now? He's a director of Thames Water. I mean, for goodness sake, if that's the best they can do... You see, it's typical of the Labour Party, because this is an idea that Tim Bell and I came up with years ago, and we had 10 business leaders write an open letter to the Times, and they were very famous top businessmen like Arnold Weinstock, James Hansen, people who were admired and respected all around the world with very successful companies. 10 people who resonated with the entire business and beyond community. These people 120 of them, most people never heard of them. Where is the CEO of British Aerospace? She's standing
There are
in
a lot
front
of
of
former chief
And I tell you
executives in
who's
this
missing,
list.
the chief executive of Boots, who came out for Labour but is conspicuously absent from that letter.
And also, where's, for example, James Dyson, Britain's most famous businessman?
Yeah, Sebastian James. But who isn't on there, of course, is Richard Walker from Iceland, who, as we know...
Malcolm Walker from Iceland, yes.
A month before he joined Labour Party, was writing to Rishi Sunak saying, why can't I have a safe seat?
So that's his son, wasn't it, Richard Walker, who's gone through. But so Malcolm Walker, the founder of Iceland, has signed
that's right,
this letter. But there's a lot of, as you say, former executives of companies on here.
It's meaningless. And you see, they take a good idea and show how not to execute it. That absolutely sums up the Labour Party.
Please don't.
They can't do it.
He's got a point, hasn't he? There's not a single FTSE 100 boss on that letter.
No, that is a point, but I mean, I don't know why there isn't. The important thing is...
Because they wouldn't have signed it, because they'd have asked them.
Well, I don't know.
Of course they've asked them,
I don't know, and I don't know whether a FTSE 100 CEO thought it was appropriate to sign either side. Have we got a list here at the moment of all the FTSE 100 CEOs who signed for the Tories?
I don't any have signed for the Tories yet.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So it may well be that they've decided not to sign for political parties.
Yeah.
What this is actually showing is that business likes what Labour is offering at the moment. And there's been an awful lot of negotiation along the way.
The restaurateur Tom Kerridge, that's a bit desperate, isn't it?
Well, you may not like the businessmen they've got,
but he's much of a media. Tom's as much of a media character.
On the front page, City figures back Labour. I wouldn't call Tom Kerridge a chef, a City figure.
Well, how many people does he employ? If it's over 100, I'd be very surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, as I've said, it's a good idea to do it. I can see why they did it. Unfortunately, they couldn't come up with any kind of quality or anything that really resonated. As I say, the biggest names in British business have not signed the letter for Labour, and I don't think the Conservatives have asked anyone to sign yet.
Well, very unusual, because the Tories normally do have a whole list of big businessmen.
We've got 5 weeks to go.
I'm sure they'll rustle up
a Tory letter with some big names than a chef called Tom Kerridge, who I had to Google.
Yeah.
Right, gentlemen, we've got to take a quick break now, because up next, nearly 7 out of 10 of the most powerful jobs in Britain are still taken up by men. Should this change?
Very cross about it.
Maybe women should just work harder. It's a little bit more complicated than that, isn't it? This is GB News. Don't go anywhere.
Good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after a showery weekend for many of us, there is further rain on the way as we head through the rest of today. This arriving into the west through the early hours of this morning and continues to push its way northwards as we head through this afternoon. But it will be a bit of a brighter start across parts of Scotland and northern England through this morning. That rain continues to turn quite heavy in places, particularly across western parts of Scotland, although we could see some showers developing across parts of Northern Ireland, central and southern parts of England. There could be some hail and thunder mixed in here too. Temperatures round about average for the time of year, 17 or 18 degrees across the south, but definitely feeling cooler under that cloud and rain. Through the rest of Tuesday evening, the rain continues to push its way northwards across parts of Scotland. The very far northeast perhaps getting away with some dry conditions, but that rain turning heavy in places, and those blustery, thundery showers continuing across parts of Northern Ireland and into southern parts of Scotland through this evening. The showers also continuing for northern parts of and eastern parts of England, but further south and further west, we will see outbreaks of rain continuing to push their way eastwards overnight tonight and into the early hours of Wednesday morning. Showers gradually easing generally, though, through the early hours of the morning, and there will be some clear spells between those showers, so perhaps turning a little chilly in places, but quite widely, those temperatures holding up into the double figures into the early hours of Wednesday morning. Around 12, 13, perhaps even 14 degrees in places, but perhaps a little lower under those clearer spells. It does mean that Wednesday starts a little drier and brighter for many of us, though. There will be some sunshine as we head through the morning, perhaps a little cloudier, though, across parts of Scotland. But as we head in towards Wednesday afternoon, heavy showers developing again. The heavier showers once more across parts of eastern Scotland, northeastern England, but almost anywhere could see a shower through the afternoon, again with some hail and thunder mixed in too. Perhaps a little warmer than Tuesday with highs of 19 or 20 degrees and a little cooler further north.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Very good morning, 10:46. So it doesn't seem too controversial a question. Do women deserve powerful jobs?
We asked that question because nearly 7 out of 10 of the biggest jobs in business are taken up by men. So, do we need to boost female representation in boardrooms, or do women need to work harder?
Do women need to work harder to get their way up the career
When you've done the
ladder?
housework, when you've run the kids to school, sorted out dinner in the evening...
Done all the emotional housekeeping for everybody in the family, done all the other stuff that needs doing. Anyway, let's talk now to YouTuber and political commentator Pearl Davis and feminist and writer Jean Hatchett. Good morning, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us. Pearl, let me come to you. Why are women still not quite breaking through that glass ceiling in the numbers that we potentially could be doing?
Well, women aren't breaking that glass ceiling because really we're not doing equal work. You know, women don't build any of these companies. You know, when we look at top female billionaires, we see Kim Kardashian where men have Elon Musk. If women aren't willing to build these companies themselves, why do we go to the men and say, give me the best jobs in these companies? And if we look at society at large, women don't do the hardest jobs. You know, men create 75% of our food, 80% of our stuff. And in 150 years of Nobel Peace Prizes for the hardest things like physics or chemistry, 0 all-women teams have won. We're not picking career fields or even going to college for the highest paying stuff.
But why
so,
not,
you know, my answer is simple. Women are not working as hard as men, and therefore we're not getting the results that men are getting.
Jean, we're just not working as hard as the men. We're sat around filing our fingernails and baking cakes while the men go out and create for the benefits of us all.
Complaining. Yeah, because that's what women do best is complain.
Go on, Jean. Let Jean Hatchett come in.
Why do we need to be equal? And that's my question. Why is equality something that we strive for?
Well, let's see if Jean can answer that. Jean.
I mean, you know, this is an absolute basic level of inequality on a board, because what Pearl's saying is that women don't have the merit because they don't do the work. But you've already got those boards stocked with men. Who decided the merit of those men? Other men. So we're working within an already established patriarchal society, which has already laid the groundwork for those men to lead those companies and do all this work that Pearl assumes they are more capable of than women. But, you know, for those board positions, 65% of those positions are nominations. Those men nominate other men. You know, that's the patriarchal society we've lived in for and been aware of for, you know, centuries. And Pearl can pretend she's not aware of it, but, you know, that's how you build a career as a YouTuber. But the actual, you know, the fundamental thing here is this is not one of the key issues for feminist women. You know, the structural oppression of women goes on in so many different levels. And, you know, male violence against women is at epidemic levels. So when you're asking why women aren't there, why they aren't doing this work, there are much deeper reasons why women don't attain those heights, and specifically working class women who will never get anywhere near a boardroom.
Go on, Pearl. Go on, Pearl.
Yeah, because... I disagree. I disagree that we are in a patriarchy. I would say we're in something closer to a matriarchy where women have more power than men. You know, I've spoken to corporate recruiters and they actually give women preferential treatment through DEI hiring practices. I disagree completely that there's anything holding me back as a woman. I've worked in corporate America. They're incredibly accommodating. And if anything, really, you're given more privilege and more treatment. The problem is women just aren't doing the work. Second thing you said is what? Male violence is preventing me from getting a job? Are you kidding me? That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. Women are actually the more violent gender. You know, women, when we look at the most abusive relationships, do you know what they are? Lesbians. Lesbians are the most abusive. So the funny thing is,
more women are killed at the hands of their partners than men are killed at the hands of their female partners every single day in this country. But let's bring it back to the issue then about women are not. Hang on, Pearl. Let's just because that's just empirically, evidentially true that our prisons across the world are full of men who have murdered their female partners, as opposed to women who have murdered their male partners. That's just nonsense.
Let me correct you. Women have aborted an eighth of the world population. The most violent place someone can be is in their mother's womb.
Let's not take this down an abortion rabbit hole.
No, just
one of the reasons. Well, that's not just being honest. That's just being ridiculous. The thing is, Jean, one of the reasons that women enter the business world and don't make it onto the board level, which is what this story is about, is because of family commitments. That is a big point at which women have a pivot in their life and they decide, do I have to give more time to my family? Am I able to do both? And they find repeatedly, Jean, that they can't do both. And part of that lies at the door of fathers who, when they have a child, still presume 100% of childcare raising is the female responsibility.
Well, women aren't actually being...
Hang on, Pearl. I want to hear from Jean. Go on, Jean.
Yeah. I think we're on the same page there because, you know, there are other issues as well as maternity and the commitments of family life for women. And you know, some of the comments there about lesbian women were abhorrent. I think, you know, we've also got to look at menopause. Can I speak, please? You're very rude at interrupting. I've seen your interviewing style. It's not pleasant. Please stop. So, you know, you've got... levels of maternity that put pressures on women. You've got menopause. You have got a system where women will not put themselves forward for jobs because of decades of having their confidence undermined by men in a workplace. And some of that is sexual harassment. Not all women are subject to sexual harassment. But, you know, we have to stick with statistics here, and we have to stick with how men get to those positions and why women don't. And, you know, throwing out these random anecdotal examples of why you can particularly get to a position that ignores the actual experience of women attempting to get to those positions, that's not really an argument. It's dismissing, you know, the statistical evidence of why women don't.
That's right. Pearl, last word to you. I think we've got time.
Okay, you know, I want to show just from this conversation where women don't live in the real world. You know, she said something really important, that women have had their confidence undermined. Men know that actually moving up in corporate America is not about confidence, it's about skill. And yet one of the leading, you know, feminists, I'm assuming, I don't know too much about her, but one of the leading feminists is saying that confidence is required to move up in corporate America. No, honey, skill. The second thing we're going to talk about is women being mothers. You know, Morgan Stanley's predicting half of women between 25 and 45 will be single and childless by 2030. Women aren't having kids. The birth rate's declining. So, you know, this idea that women are putting their motherly duties above working, it's just not the case anymore. You know, we have all
No,
of
it's
the
because they can't do both, because they feel that too much structurally doing both is too difficult if you want to do both well. You can be a rubbish mum and work all the time, and you can be a brilliant rubbish in the workplace and be a brilliant mum. It's very hard to do both well, Pearl. And one day you might find that out. Both of you, thank you so much. Pearl Davis and Jean Hatchett there.
What an interesting debate. I kept out of it, did you notice? Uncharacteristically.
Yeah. Well,
although having said that...
Yeah, but why? Is that because you think it's not relevant to you?
No, I just thought it'd be more interesting to have three women slugging it out.
But this is the problem. It's not a women's problem.
I've had some great women bosses. Some of my best bosses have been women.
Good contribution. Here's Ellie with the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after a showery weekend for many of us, there is further rain on the way as we head through the rest of today. This arriving into the west through the early hours of this morning and continues to push its way northwards as we head through this afternoon. But it will be a bit of a brighter start across parts of Scotland and northern England through this morning. That rain continues to turn quite heavy in places, particularly across western parts of Scotland, although we could see some showers developing across parts of Northern Ireland, central and southern parts of England. There could be some hail and thunder mixed in here too. Temperatures round about average for the time of year, 17 or 18 degrees across the south, but definitely feeling cooler under that cloud and rain. Through the rest of Tuesday evening, the rain continues to push its way northwards across parts of Scotland. The very far northeast perhaps getting away with some dry conditions, but that rain turning heavy in places and those blustery, thundery showers continuing across parts of Northern Ireland and into southern parts of Scotland through this evening. The showers also continuing for northern parts of and eastern parts of England, but further south and further west, we will see outbreaks of rain continuing to push their way eastwards overnight tonight and into the early hours of Wednesday morning. Showers gradually easing generally though through the early hours of the morning, and there will be some clear spells between those showers, so perhaps turning a little chilly in places, but quite widely those temperatures holding up into the double figures into the early hours of Wednesday morning. Around 12, 13, perhaps even 14 degrees in places, but perhaps a little lower under those clearer spells. It does mean that Wednesday starts a little drier and brighter for many of us though. There will be some sunshine as we head through the morning, perhaps a little cloudier though across parts of Scotland. But as we head in towards Wednesday afternoon, heavy showers developing again. The heavier showers once more across parts of eastern Scotland, northeastern England, but almost anywhere could see a shower through the afternoon, again with some hail and thunder mixed in too. Perhaps a little warmer than Tuesday with highs of 19 or 20 degrees and a little cooler further north.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you can win a whopping £20,000 cash. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. You've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go. How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other. Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Morning, 11 a.m. on Tuesday, the 28th of May. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So, good morning. Boost for pensioners. Rishi Sunak declares that state pensioners will never be taxed and that he is on side with those voters. Do you think he is?
And is it educating for the rich? A shocking report shows now 4 in 10 private school pupils could be driven out by Sir Keir Starmer's VAT tax rate.
And bringing growth to Britain, Labour's Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves has promised to lead the most pro-growth Treasury in our country's history. She didn't say how she'd do it.
And burglary crackdown. Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey says, you heard this before, all burglaries are going to be investigated if his party comes to power. Meanwhile, he's been out in the water this morning in Windermere.
I've been wondering why Ed Davies gone paddleboarding this morning.
Rivers.
Clean water. The penny just dropped.
And they have done well on it.
They've done really well on this. I was talking to somebody
all the pollution
over the weekend who was thinking about voting reform, actually, and then got the leaflet through the door about the Liberal Democrats saying they clean up the rivers. And he went, that actually is a big thing for me. I'm going to vote for the Lib Dems. It's a vote winner, that one. They've done well with that.
And as Piers Pottinger pointed out, I'm not sure it's a great idea for those those businessmen and women who are backing Labour to include a director of Thames Water, which A, could about to go bust, and B, is one of the worst offenders for bugging pollution in our rivers.
Yeah.
Thanks, Labour.
Get in touch this morning. gbnews.com/your say is the place to leave your messages for us and each other. First, though, the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you. The top stories this hour. The Shadow Chancellor is promising to introduce new budget rules aimed at preventing the turmoil seen following Liz Truss's mini-budget. In her first major speech of the election campaign, Rachel Reeves said the Conservative Party deserves to be judged on what she called 14 years of chaos and decline. She said average homeowners were paying around £240 more every month due to the mini-budget, while wages remained flat and taxpayers are asked to pay more for less. Promising that a Labour government would bring business back to Britain, Ms Reeves said that if the economy had grown at the OECD's average rate, it would be £150 million larger than it is today.
If our economy had have grown at the average rate of OECD countries these last 14 years, our economy today would be £150 billion larger, worth £5,000 for every household, and providing £55 billion more investment for our public services. That is their record, and they deserve to be judged on it.
Meanwhile, pensioners could be in for a tax break worth up to £2.4 billion a year as part of an election pledge by the Conservative Party. It could see cuts worth around £95 in the next tax year, rising to £275 by 2029. The Prime Minister says it'll be funded by a clampdown on tax dodgers, despite recent data showing that staff shortages have led to HMRC answering 22% fewer calls than it did in 2020. Labour described the plan as a desperate move, but Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride told GB News it's part of the government's broader plan.
Want to go still further, and that's where the triple lot plus comes in. And what that means is that we will be uprating not just the pensions by the triple lot, but also what's called the personal allowance. That's the amount that you can earn without paying any income tax, also by that same uprating, by the triple lock uprating. And what that will mean is tax cuts now for pensioners throughout the next Parliament. Labour have completely dismissed this. which basically means that during the next Parliament under Labour, what you're going to be seeing is millions of pensioners being dragged into paying income tax, having to fill all those forms in, all that paperwork and red tape, and extra costs to pensioners.
Environmental experts would sit on boards of water companies to improve accountability and transparency as part of the Liberal Democrat plan. Sarah Davey took to a paddle board in Lake Windermere as the party outlined plans to have environmental experts sit on water company boards as non-executive directors to improve public accountability and transparency. He said water companies are getting away with what he called a national sewage scandal, while Conservative MPs and ministers have sat on their hands. It comes as data shows sewage spills in England's rivers and seas more than doubled in 2023. Meanwhile, more than 120 business leaders offer their public support to the Labour Party. In an open letter published by The Times, the leaders say that a new outlook is needed so the UK can break free from a decade of economic stagnation. Some of those who've signed the message include the chef Tom Kerridge and former CEOs of Heathrow, JP Morgan and Aston Martin. In other news now, the Mayor of London has criticised the government's failure to introduce a total ban on zombie knives, calling it a betrayal of the safety of young people. Sadiq Khan is calling on the Home Secretary to bring forward the legislation, which would include a ban on the sale of the weapons. He says the government isn't taking the crisis seriously enough and that he's set aside more than £150 million for policing and crime prevention in London. And finally, nearly £30 million was lost to courier fraud in the last year as scammers targeted pensioners. Victims lost an average of £20,000 to the scams, where fraudsters pose as police officers or bank officials and trick householders into handing over money or valuables to a courier. Police say people in their 80s were the most likely to be targeted, with one person losing £56,000. 5 arrests were made this month following a combined police effort across England and Wales. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Andrew and Beth.
Very good morning.
It's 11:06.
Now then, a lot of you were very unhappy with Rachel Reeves talking there. Christina said, are you sure she isn't an AI bot?
Do you know, I get that, because she just was like, she was on it was a monologue. She looked nervous. I mean, she's not a great speaker, is she? And so perhaps that shouldn't matter. And we don't need the Chancellor to be flashy. We want them to be not flashy. But it was just the same old retread statistics and...
They're all a bit robotic, though. Look at Sunak. There's something wrong with our political class, that they are A-grade students with no human skill or warmth, it seems.
Well, the ones who can communicate, Farage, he's not standing for Parliament, which, of course, he's getting a lot of flack for, and Boris, great communicator, whatever else you think of him.
I do think a lot of other things about him as well, I have to say. A lot of you are getting in touch as well about the plan to put 20% on private school fees from Labour. Maggie said there are children with health conditions that go to private schools because the state system cannot cater for them. What would Starmer like those parents to do? Now, Labour would say if you have an educational healthcare plan, so you have sufficient learning needs that the state will pay for your education, the state is paying for your education in a private setting anyway. There are quite a few children like that. But, of course, if you lose those private schools because they have to close down, what are we going to do with those children that have very specific needs?
There is an irony here, because Keir Starmer, he was going to school, in a school, I think it was in Surrey, the school was being faced with being closed, but it became private. And Keir Starmer stayed on at the school and benefited for, I think, 3 years. He was a beneficiary of private education. The state picked up his private fees. Yeah. So he knows how effective private schools can be in terms of social mobility.
Absolutely. And
because he bangs on about the fact he's from a working class background, would he have done as well in life as Director of Public Prosecutions if he hadn't had the benefit of that private education?
Private schools now offer their sports facilities to the state system. The state system should have better sports facilities. That would be tick job number one if I was Prime Minister.
Well, they've sold off a lot of their paying.
They sold off so much of their land. They can't, you know, the state schools are already not doing terribly well, and the private system takes the pressure off the state system. That's the issue, whether you agree with it ideologically or not. And of course it's not ideal, and of course it would be wonderful if we had no private schools or no need for private schools, and all the state schools were brilliant, and all those kids with committed families were all in the same system. That would be wonderful, but that's not what we have, and this isn't going to make that happen.
Yeah. Now, key part of the election campaign today, the Prime Minister has moved us on to an area where he thinks it will be safer. So he's saying that pensions, the state pension, will never be taxed in a policy that's being dubbed triple lock plus.
That's right. He says he's going to clamp down on tax dodgers in order to pay for this.
That old money tree.
Labour's Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth says that Rishi Sunak is planning to reward Britain's pensioners for their loyalty by stabbing them in the back, just like he did to Boris Johnson and just like he's done to his own MPs.
I really don't understand that line of attack.
I don't get it. Maybe this person can tell us why. Joining us now is former Pensions Minister Baroness Ros Altman. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. So is this cause for celebration for pensioners? Is it sufficiently rewarding that they would give their vote to the Conservatives?
Well, I don't know about the votes, but I do think this is a very sensible policy decision. I've been warning of, and others too have been warning, that there is a real danger that millions of pensioners will suddenly be dragged, often for the first time in their lives, into the tax net, which requires them to make their own tax returns rather than having money deducted at work by PAYE, for example. And they will not be able to cope with it if all they've got is the basic or new state pension, and that's it, no private pensions, no other income. Then they should not have to grapple with the complexities of the tax system, which can leave them very often facing penalties for not filling in a form that they never knew they had to fill in and didn't realise that they would be liable for a little bit of tax. This would be a real administrative nightmare as well, because suddenly millions more people will be pushed over the frozen tax threshold. It's good news that the state pension is going up, of course, but to force pensioners into the tax net when all they've got is their state pension and no other income. We're not talking about well-off pensioners. We're talking about the millions of pensioners who have very little to live on for the rest of their lives, trying to make their lives a little bit more comfortable and a little bit less worrying, actually, I think is a really good thing.
And Baroness Altman, it's not. I'm glad you make the point about the admin and the forms, because anyone confronting a tax form with HMRC, it is bewildering, baffling, and often pretty scary. And if you're 82 and you're worried about this, will take all of that away. Apart from the fact it's also going to mean they're not going to be having to find extra money because of the way this government has successively frozen the tax allowances.
Yes, and of course, we've seen big tax cuts in the form of national insurance reductions already in the last year or two, but pensioners haven't benefited from that. So they were facing a potential nightmare scenario where, because their state pension is just trying to keep up with either the cost of living or earnings in the country as a whole, they would have been dragged into this tax net and into the ambit of the inland revenue. As I say, many of these older pensioners will never have filled in a tax return form in their life, will never have had to negotiate that. These are the poorest people, not those who are, used to earning big sums and have got very generous other pensions. So our state pension is not a king's ransom. People trying to live on it have to make do. They're not having a life of luxury, and they certainly can't afford to pay an accountant, for example, to try and help them know what their tax liability might be. And that's why I think the government needs to recognise that our state pension should be part of the tax-free personal threshold. So if that's all you've got, you don't have to worry about penalties and tax forms and all sorts of other things like.
In terms of the elderly in this country and where they might vote, one big issue that is missing for me from both pledges, from both major parties, is any mention of social care.
Social care,
Ross.
absolutely.
And I find that baffling, bemusing and frankly depressing.
I don't find it baffling or bemusing, but it is depressing. It's not baffling or bemusing because so many politicians have come a cropper trying to sort social care out. And successive governments over the years have promised to deal with this. We've had reviews, we've had royal commissions, we've had recommendations, we've even had legislation with the Care Act in 2014, 10 years ago. There was a legislation passed that would say we should cap at least the extreme care costs for people. Nothing has changed. That law has never been brought into practice, and we've had promises of raising money from national insurance for social care. Meanwhile, national insurance has actually been cut, which I don't say is a bad thing, but where is the provision for social care? At the moment, it is... Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say there's nothing from either party at the moment in terms of... And I think it affects so many people because it doesn't just affect the elderly, it affects those in the middle of life who are caring for elderly parents. It then affects the grandchildren who are watching their elderly parents be treated poorly by the system. Why is it so difficult then, Ross?
Well, because for the last few decades, social care has been privatised. Yeah. It's been left to private companies. And councils look after those who can't afford high fees, but councils don't actually run the social care. There are a few council-run homes, but not very many. And so cash-strapped councils are being told they have to find money to pay for increasing numbers of people who need social care, but they haven't got the budget to pay for it. Meanwhile, you've had private companies making a lot of money by extracting the equity from these homes, taking the property value for themselves and loading up these homes with debt. And that itself makes the economics of this very difficult. It also starkly highlights the unfairness facing many older people and, as you say, their families, who ultimately pick up much of the burden. Because if you are an extremely highly paid person and you get cancer, the NHS picks up the cost for you. But if you are a widow with very little other than the house you live in, and you get dementia and you need care, you have to pay the whole lot yourself.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's scandalous.
That just doesn't stack up. The gross unfairness is something that we need to address. And I think social care should have been built into the pension saving provision so that there's money set aside for care. I think we need a national, perhaps, equity release scheme where you don't have huge interest payments, but the government will lend you money against the value of your home. If you then only need care for a very short period of time, you don't lose much of the value. However, you could also have savings plans specifically for care, like care ISAs, which some people would take out, but at the moment you don't have any tax breaks to save for social care. And that is wrong.
Lovely to talk to you. Former Pensions Minister there, Baroness Ros Altman.
Yeah, there was a deal done between Cameron, Clegg and Miliband back in 2012, an all-party agreement to sort out social care. Cameron pulled out of it.
Cameron pulled out
of it. So that was 10 years ago, 12 years ago now, and where are we now?
Yeah, it's dreadful.
It's terrible. And if Labour don't come up with something like that, that would be shameful.
Yeah, well, they're just ignoring it at the moment, aren't they? Because it's so controversial. Still to come this morning, are your teenagers in your life ready to join the army? We're going to be discussing Rishi Sunak's National Service Plan. Not quite what it sounds like. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Emma, let's start, shall we, with Prince William confirming on the Isles of Scilly yesterday that Kate is doing well. I thought it was a very brave lady to say, "Are we allowed to ask how the Princess of Wales is?" And I thought, well, we're not, so good for you.
Yeah. One of the hospitals he visited on the Isles of Scilly, an administrator, a hospital administrator, asked him how Kate was doing, and he said, "She's doing well, thanks."
Until we hear official word from the palace, then we're just going to have to rely on little snippets like this.
It does seem to be serious. So,
it does.
We wish her
What's
very
quite
best.
telling as well, I went through some of the social media comments on this, and people that live on the Isle of Scilly were just saying how close they got, how wonderful it was. He's supporting local businesses, and that pasty shop will now be like treasured, forever. That people forever go there.
On the Quay. It sounds great. It's called On the Quay.
Compare and contrast with this "I feel at home in Nigeria" vibe that Meghan's putting out. Two very, very different takes on how to be a royal.
Do they want to be royals or do they not? Because they seem to want sort of half the trappings but without all the kind of responsibilities.
These two brothers, who obviously went through a lot growing up, obviously can't stand the sight of each other right now, and it's just really sad.
Well, it goes beyond the brothers. I mean, we are told from some of the papers this morning that the King didn't have time in his schedule to see his son because he was actually meeting David Beckham for a private meeting.
Well, who would you choose?
I mean, I know I
It's all about priorities.
But, you surely, you could just pop in as well. I reckon that Harry and Bex are pals, probably. So what's gone on there, and will they ever be able to repair things?
And they really were so close. I mean, when you compare the Buckingham Palace garden party, a couple of miles down the road, literally Harry was at Westminster or wherever it was. It wasn't far. And it absolutely would have been possible for him to go.
3 miles apart, and yet absolutely worlds apart in terms of their emotional state.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're going to cross live now to the Prime Minister, who's on the campaign trail in Stoke-on-Trent in Staffordshire. These were seats that the Tories won unexpectedly at the last election, and it would take a miracle to hold them. Here he is.
From 11% when I got this job, down to 2%, back to normal. Now, wages have been rising faster than prices for almost a year. The economy at the start of this year grew faster than France, Germany, Italy, even America. So we really have turned a corner, and I hope you can see that the plan is working and that we've restored economic stability. Because that's what you get with me, that's what you get with the Conservatives. We restored economic stability, we always will prioritise that. And the question now, the question for all of you, the question for the country, is who do you trust to build on that foundation and secure a future for you, your family, and our country? And that's the choice at this election. Do we build on that progress that we've all collectively made and go forward? Or do we go back to square one with no plan and no certainty? Now, the only certainty you're going to get with the Labour Party is that they're going to run out of money and put up your taxes. As clear as night follows day. Now, we've crunched the numbers. Actually, not we, actually. The Treasury, the officials at the Treasury have crunched the numbers, totted up all the things they said they want to spend money on and all the ways that they haven't found to pay for them and figured out what it's going to cost you. And I can tell you, it's going to cost you £2,000 each. £2,000 for every working family in our country in higher taxes to pay for their long list of things, right? That's not going to bring financial security to you and your family. Now, you all know, you read newspapers, you turn on telly every day. Whether we like it or not, we're living in a more dangerous and uncertain time than we have in decades. Iran, Russia, North Korea, China, working together in ways which threaten our values, our interests, not just abroad, but here at home too. States weaponising migration to threaten the integrity of our borders. And these uncertain times call for a bold plan, clear action so that we can secure the future of our country, chart a course to a more secure future for all of you. And that's what you'll get with us. Let's just take the topic of illegal migration, something I know is important to all of you, something Jonathan and I speak about a lot. Right? It's fundamentally unfair that people jump the queue and come to our country illegally, puts pressure on local services, whether it's hotels here or elsewhere, puts people's lives at risk. It's simply not right. We've got a bold plan to deal with the boat. Right? And when I first announced it, or announced by my predecessor, and I first got this job, people said, oh no, this is not the right thing to do. Do you know what? Now, across Europe, the penny has dropped that our approach is the right approach. Because unless people know that if they come here illegally, they won't be able to stay, and we will be able to remove them, we won't be able to have a proper deterrent and stop them coming in the first place. Now, everyone else is realising that. One person doesn't, Keir Starmer. Been very clear. He is going to let out all the people that we have detained to go on those flights. He's going to cancel those flights, offer an amnesty to illegal migrants, and all that's going to do is make us the soft touch of Europe, a magnet for hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants from across Europe all to come here. In any way you look at it, the Labour Party are not going to deliver a secure future for any of us on any dimension that you care about. Now look, Labour also want you to think that this election is over before it has even begun. Well, you know what? I don't think this election is a foregone conclusion. I'm going to fight very hard every single day to earn your trust. And I also don't think the British people being taken for granted. Right? We're going to keep putting bold actions on the table that I think are going to transform this country for the better. You saw that just over the last few days. Our plan, a new version of national service, so young people can get the skills, opportunities that they need, that we can foster a culture of service in our country to make our society more cohesive, so that we can strengthen our country's resilience and security for the long term. Right? That is a bold plan. What's the contrast? Keir Starmer gave another half-an-hour speech yesterday. Right? Can any of you name a single new idea that came out of that speech? A single bold thing that's going to change our country for the better? No, because he's taking the country for granted, assuming he can waltz in to Downing Street without saying what he's going to do, without having the courage to tell you about his plans. Right? And this is someone, if he was happy to abandon every single promise he made to become Labour leader once he got the job, what makes you think that he won't do exactly the same thing if he ever became Prime Minister? If he can't stand for anything himself, how can he stand up for all of you? Now, in contrast, we are prepared to take bold action. We do have a clear plan, and that is how we're going to deliver a secure future for you and your families. And I want to build a Britain where we can have a renewed sense of confidence in ourselves, in our communities, pride in our country, a country where your hard work is rewarded, where we continue to cut your taxes, a country where the opportunities that were there for the previous generation are going to be there for the next generation, and a country where our defence and safety is assured. That is the secure future that I'm working towards, and with your support, that's what I will deliver for all of you. Thank you very much for having me. All right.
Mr. Oakman, and if you were listening on the radio, you won't have observed the fact that we were watching the Prime Minister's back for most of that speech. Piers, you've stage managed so many of these speeches in your time with Belle Pottinger. How do they allow him out like that?
I have no idea. I mean, whatever bright spark behind in the campaign is responsible for that. That event was held for television, for the media. You don't have someone with their back to you the whole time and in front of a very amused-looking audience of rather bizarre collection of people. We've no idea who the hell they are. And, I mean, it was, again, I mean, you know, Rishi announces some good policy and then takes a big step back with an event like that. Absolutely appalling, in my view.
Does it matter, Nigel, to voters that something like that is
it matters hugely. I mean, the whole thing about having aides around these people is to make sure they don't do something stupid. So the idea of sending him to the birthplace of the Titanic to launch the campaign...
Brilliant.
You just don't do things like that. You watch out to make sure there's no exit sign above you when he's being photographed. photographed. So the idea he can actually come there and have his back to us all the way through means that the either it's just kids running it who don't know what they're doing, or they want him to lose because it just looks appalling.
It reminds me, Nigel and I, old enough to remember, we both might have been there. I can't remember if it was Brands Hatch night or the other big race course. It was the launch of the 1997 election campaign. John Major got in this Formula One car. The wheels fell off. I mean, and that was the headline in every single...
Silverstone, I think it was Silverstone.
The wheels fall off Tory campaign, and it became the metaphor, Piers, didn't it?
It does, yes. I mean, you know, as Nigel said, I mean, it must be someone who's got no experience behind this because, you know, or they want him to lose, which is possible, I suppose. But, I mean, that's just inept. And quite frankly, after the umbrella incident and the Titanic, the last thing we need is this. And I really feel that Rishi is being left out there on his own to lose the election.
But why are we not seeing other parts of the Tory cabinet? There is a big...
I wonder,
a lot of them are standing down, but where are they?
Well, exactly. I'd love to know what they're doing and where they are. And there doesn't seem to be any dynamism in this campaign from Rishi and his team, because all they're doing is going to the same thing they do all the time. They go around the country to sort of odd places and do a bit of this stuff, which doesn't actually change anyone's view.
That look bored stiff.
He's having to push back on accusations that people have been saying that he's lining up to basically head over to America. And one person who accused him of that was the Conservatives' Zach Goldsmith, Nigel, on Twitter this week, who really did sort of lay into Rishi Sunak.
Well, there are an awful lot of Tory MPs who have been laying into him. I mean, they're furious for a start. The election was called when it was, that they all expected to go in the autumn. One Tory MP is not cancelling his holiday, is going to go off to Greece. And
I think he's there already.
He's there already, isn't he?
Yeah,
Steve Baker.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everything seems to be going, that can go wrong, is going wrong. And then he comes up with a load of policies which are obviously written on the back of a fag packet that he failed to ban.
The pension one is very, as Ros Alton was saying, very popular, very sensible, and I'm surprised your lot aren't going for it.
Well, I don't think 27p a day extra is actually a great windfall for pensioners.
It's a principle to say that the state pension will never be taxed. That's a very important principle.
And what they should
which Labour are not agreeing with.
And what they should be doing is making sure that thresholds go up sufficiently so that state pension never would be taxed, and that would have been the situation had they not frozen thresholds all the way through. Now, I appreciate at the moment they haven't got the money to try and increase them, but that should be the target, so it's thresholds for all, not just for one group of people.
Well, it's interesting you say you appreciate they haven't got the money at the moment. Labour have yet to explain where they're going to find the money for any of the stuff that they're hinting at maybe they're doing.
Just to look
but also California for Rishi, I don't blame him if he goes there, quite frankly, because after a Labour government, I think he'll be joined by an awful lot of people in this country. Although I suspect what he could do, of course, is take the first plane to Rwanda, which is also quite a booming country at the moment.
It certainly is now.
If you look at what Zach Goldsmith said on Twitter, I understand the anger towards Sunak, who's damaged the party almost beyond repair and all but guaranteed the majority of his MPs will lose their job next month.
Yeah, well, Zach Goldsmith is an extremely rich person who can say what he likes. He was involved with the government and not very successfully. He's rather embittered at not being in government, and that's all it shows. Embittered ex-ministers are two a penny in this country, and no one really takes any notice of them.
No, and of course he was one of Boris's big backers.
Yes, but, you know, I mean, no one really, quite frankly, Zach Goldsmith wants to be important and powerful, but he isn't.
And in answer to Bev's original question, I mean, quite clearly, Rishi Sunak will have to resign should he lose the election on the basis that nobody has ever elected him to the job of Prime Minister. The question is...
He'll stay on as leader for a bit, I think.
Well, I would doubt it.
Oh, I think he won't.
I think he will go as soon as they can organise a new leadership contact.
I think so. Right, we've got to move on again, guys, because Tatiana Sanchez is waiting for us with the latest news headlines. Thank you.
Bev, thank you very much. The top stories this morning. The Prime Minister says the Treasury has crunched the numbers and claims Labour's economic promises do not add up. While speaking in Staffordshire just moments ago, the Prime Minister has said that his government's plan is working, whilst he also said that Labour's promises would only bring uncertainty, including on migration. Meanwhile, the Shadow Chancellor is promising to introduce new budget rules aimed at preventing the turmoil seen following Liz Truss's mini-budget. In her first major speech of the election campaign, Rachel Reeves said the Conservative Party deserves to be judged on what she called 14 years of chaos and decline. She said average homeowners were paying around £240 more every month due to the mini-budget, while wages remained flat and taxpayers are asked to pay more for less. Sir Ed Davey took to a paddleboard in Lake Windermere this morning as the Liberal Democrats outlined plans to have environmental experts sit on water company boards to boost accountability and transparency. He said water utilities are getting away with what he called a national sewage scandal, while Conservative MPs and ministers have sat on their hands. It comes as data shows sewage spills in England rivers and seas more than doubled in 2023. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
If she has such ambitions, where does this leave Prince Harry? I mean, he's obviously already resentful that he was treated as a spare back here in Britain. But he would only then become even more of a spare if he were married to either the president or somebody who was clearly setting her sights that way and taking various offices.
Yes, clearly this presents a problem for Harry, because if you notice what their plans are, and there's Meghan's lifestyle blog, American Riviera Orchard, an odd name, really rather ponderous. I think her PRs could have thought up something better. And then this Netflix program on cookery and entertainment and so forth. Harry is doing a series on polo, which is a bit of an elitist sport, actually. But of course, Harry has got Invictus. And so they have to, as they plan, Harry must, it must be absolutely definite that Harry will be integral to the planning. I mean, remember, he is very emotionally reliant on her and therefore might be content in this context to be a spare, even if many people would laugh. But I certainly see, remember, you have to begin by hard campaigning. They're only putting in a each for their charity Archwell. If they really do want Meghan to go into politics, if that is her ambition, then I think she should make absolutely sure she's got the ground rules of how you do this in America. They've got to have a look at also whether they would wish to have their, or keep their titles in, even though they're in abeyance. This too is a problem. I mean, if you're really looking at a serious political career, I don't see it starting from what we know now.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Gloria Di Piero. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11:37 with Britain's News with GB News, Andrew Pearson, Beth Turner.
So while Labour Reform and the Tories have been making speeches this morning, we know you've been on the edge of your seat. Lib Dem leader Ed Davey has been busy in Lake Windermere.
Here he is.
If you're listening on the radio, he's trying to stand up on a paddleboard. He's got a wetsuit on and a red little life jacket.
And let me tell you, if he goes in the water, that's going to be quite a splash.
And he is looking as shaky as his campaign, and there he goes.
I think he threw himself in. I think he threw himself in. I'm sorry, call me cynical. I think he did that deliberately.
I think
because that would get him on every clip.
Yeah, but why do they think that's... The headlines write themselves as a politician if you show yourself in a slightly humiliating
and what
position.
an undignified sight as he tries to get back on the clipboard. I mean, he's rather broader of girth than he was a year ago, isn't he?
Well, that's not relevant. I suppose what he wants to draw attention to is dirty lakes, dirty rivers. And in that regard, then it is a clever campaign because they do feel strongly, and a lot of our viewers do. Have a listen to what he said to reporters. Here he is, Ed Davey.
Well, it was the Liberal Democrats who brought in the triple plus protection for pensioners, and the Conservatives reneged on that and broke that promise in the Parliament just gone. And it's rather remarkable they're trying to make out this is some great policy when they were the ones who increased taxes on pensioners in the first place by not raising the allowance. It was the Liberal Democrats who fought hard to increase the income tax allowance to help pensioners and help people on low incomes, and the Conservatives froze those tax allowances. So I don't think pensioners or anyone else is going to be fooled by the Conservatives having broken their promise, having raised taxes, now suddenly, just before election, saying they're going to do something different.
So would you support the policy if the new Conservative government brought it in? Would you vote in favour of it?
Well, I'm trying to stop a Conservative government being elected. The last thing pensioners need is another dose of Conservative government. The last thing the country needs. Liberal Democrats have some really attractive policies for pensioners. Not only are we behind the triple lock as the ones who began it in the first place, we want to make sure the health service that pensioners rely on is properly funded, that there's a care system there. The Conservatives so undermined the NHS and care for pensioners that I think there are lots of people who are retired who feel betrayed by the Conservatives.
Isn't this all a bit unfair on working people?
Well, we think the income tax allowance should be risen for everybody, not just for pensioners. We think, as we did in government, we delivered on it. Increasing the income tax allowance is the fairest thing to do for people in work as well as pensioners. And it looks like the Conservatives have just forgotten everybody who's in work.
What's your view on Labour's plans to introduce a 20% VAT levy on private school fees?
Well, Liberal Democrats don't support that because we don't think it's the way to actually improve education across the board. We want to get more money into our public education, our state education. We're going to put forward lots of very ambitious plans, way more ambitious than the Labour Party, to make sure that young people get the best start in life. And I'm really looking forward to campaigning on our manifesto policies to improve education for everybody.
Do you think Keir Starmer would make a good Prime Minister?
Listen, I'm here to talk about the Liberal Democrats, and I'm really proud of our campaign, what we're campaigning on with. It's the NHS, more GPs, more NHS dentists, the things that people really care about, our approach to getting the economy back on track, or our campaigns on the environment. We're here in the Lake District, the beautiful Lake Windermere, to campaign on the issue of sewage. It's been the Liberal Democrats who've been campaigning hard to clean up our rivers and our beaches and our lakes, and it's Liberal Democrats leading on that. So I'm focused on getting more Liberal Democrat MPs elected and defeating Conservatives.
Can I get a yes or a no on whether Keir Starmer would make a good Prime Minister?
Listen, I'm really focused on the Liberal Democrat campaign. I think people want to know in a campaign, not about the other parties when they've got a Liberal Democrat in front of them. They want to know what we're going to do. And we've got some fantastic candidates who make brilliant local champions if they're elected in their seats, and in so many seats across the country. If you want to beat the Conservatives, only a vote for the Liberal Democrats can do that. We've seen that in the south of England, in the West Country, here in Cumbria with the amazing Tim Farron. You know, across the country there are so many seats where it's the Liberal Democrat vote that's a powerful vote to defeat the Conservatives.
Last question. Did you fall into the lake on purpose?
Do you know what? Once I did, the rest I just kept falling in. But it's fun. But there's a serious message. And the serious message is, you know, lakes like Lake Windermere are so precious. Our environment in our wonderful country is so critical to so many people, and not just people who live near those lakes and rivers, people who visit them. It's important for public health, it's important for the environment, it's important for the tourist economy, right? Here in the Lake District, they need to make sure that the water companies are properly held to account. And so it wasn't just about paddle boating today, it was to launch our policy of making sure that environmental experts from the local community are on the boards of water companies, so they can't get away with what they've been getting away with, that they are properly held to account.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Muslim just find a nice warm cafe so we don't have to listen to the rain on his umbrella?
At least he had a brolly.
At least he had a brolly. What a low bar. At least he had a brolly. That pretty much sums up the election campaign so far, doesn't it? That was, of course, Lib Dem leader Ed Davey.
Do you think he threw himself in?
Beautiful Windermere.
I think he threw himself in.
I think he probably did.
He wanted the photographs, the images.
Right, don't go anywhere, because in a minute we're going to play you a clip of Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner, who is pleading with voters, with Muslim voters, for their vote. You do not want to miss it. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Many of us at risk of seeing a bit of thunder as we go through the next day or so, because there will be plenty of showers around, but also a spell of more persistent rain. That rain is pushing its way northeastwards in association with a frontal system which is marching its way across the country. As a result, many of us are going to have quite a wet afternoon, particularly across northern and eastern parts here. That's where the rain is going to be heaviest and most persistent, but plenty of showers following in behind, and like I said, some of those showers are going to turn heavy and thundery too. Temperatures are near normal, perhaps a little bit below average for the time of year, and feeling a bit unpleasant when you're caught out by that heavy persistent rain. If we take a closer look at what's going to happen as we go through this evening, and across the far northeast of Scotland, Orkney, Shetland, they're clinging on to some decent sunshine here, but elsewhere a cloudier, wetter picture, particularly across central parts of Scotland. Some heavy persistent rain could cause some problems on the roads, some significant spray to watch out for. Even elsewhere, once the persistent rains push through, it's heavy thundery downpours that we need to take care of, because there could be some hail, some frequent lightning. All of these could cause some impacts and difficult driving conditions for sure. As we go overnight, we are going to see the more persistent rain clearing away, but that doesn't mean it's going to turn dry. In fact, there will be plenty of showers to come as we go through the overnight period. Some clear spells, but on the whole it is going to be quite cloudy, perhaps the greatest chance of staying dry down towards the southwest. Temperatures not dropping a huge amount because of the largely cloudy skies, so lows in the region of around 12 to 13 Celsius for most of us. Through tomorrow, it is going to be a showery day for many. There will be some bright or sunny spells, but not a huge amount of these. Most places at risk of seeing some showers, particularly towards eastern parts of Scotland. Here, the greatest chance of some thundery downpours, but even elsewhere, there is the risk of a bit of thunder mixed in. Temperatures for many a touch higher than today, with highs of around 21 Celsius. Bye-bye.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
So there's fascinating footage that's come on social media, which I think is going to be quite an issue for Angela Rayner. She's the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party.
That's right. She's talking in her constituency of Ashton-under-Lyne. She's talking to a room entirely of Muslim men. That's the bit that struck me, that there are no women in this room. Why? Maybe because culturally that might be tricky in that particular room and that particular environment.
Now she's in a state of panic because George Galloway's Workers' Party of Britain is putting a candidate up against her. That is a candidate who will be Muslim, implacably opposed to Labour's position on the war, which is not to support an unconditional ceasefire in Gaza. We saw that Galloway won that by-election in Rochdale. Rochdale is about 8 miles from Angela Rayner's constituency. I've written about this. In the West Midlands, in the mayoral election, the George Galloway candidate got 12.5% of the vote. So there is an independent Muslim standing against Angela Rayner, and judging by this clip, she's what Mrs Thatcher, in one of her great Lincolnshire words, would say, is frit. See what you think.
My voters were very upset with the Labour Party.
I was with you and you saw me over the line. You supported me in seats that are similar to mine. People lost their seat. You were there for me, and I don't believe I could have done that without you. Now, I know that people are angry about what's happening in the Middle East, and I said live on TV, and I say to this day, if me resigning as an MP now would bring a ceasefire, I would do it. I would do it. If I could affect change, the only thing I've done, and Madge knows this, I got 3 British doctors out last week from Rafah who were stuck there. I worked hard day and night to get them out. They were stuck there because they've been helping. And I'm now working on getting aid in again because those doctors told me they went in with 10 suitcases and that lasts a week. Now they've been restricted to 2 suitcases.
What strikes me is the body language of those men. They
I
are not
find it really
looking at her.
difficult as a woman to watch that. Nobody's looking at her. None of them are making eye contact. She's trying her hardest to pitch for their vote.
She's begging them.
She's grovelling. She's saying she would resign if she thought it would enact a ceasefire in Gaza.
Well, she didn't vote for one.
Exactly.
There was an opportunity when there was 56 Labour MPs rebelled, 10 resigned from the front bench. They supported an SNP vote on this in November. She did not support it. She stuck with Keir Starmer's line, which is the same as the government line, that they do not support an unconditional ceasefire in Gaza while Hamas has still got hostages. Remember, Hamas got, what, 100 hostages still, 110 hostages? So she had her opportunity, but they listened to her in stony silence.
Who knows if they were listening to her? They were in the same room. They weren't looking at her. No other women in that room.
And that is going to be seized on by Galloway's candidate. Demeaning.
Should we talk about potholes? I know it's something that you all feel very strongly about, and a row has erupted.
Well, can I say about potholes?
Oh,
if
go on,
I
then.
was Keir Starmer, if this was a Rishi Sunak policy and young people are to be doing some voluntary work at the weekends, it would be care homes. The other thing would be fix potholes. How popular would that be? Very.
Well, a row has erupted over the maintenance of a public footpath that borders Hull and East Yorkshire. It's filled with potholes. Some of them are several inches deep. They're a problem for those who walk down the lane and for residents. Anna Riley has the story.
This medieval public footpath in East Yorkshire is popular with walkers, but a 700-metre section of the lane in Cottingham is peppered with potholes. On rainy days like this, it's prone to flooding. Trevor Saunders uses the lane every day to access his property, and he's been asking the council to repair it for decades.
You'll see on your left 3 or 4 potholes that the council say are acceptable. I'm going to stand in one for you. And you can say, imagine if you was disabled and walking down here and you happen to go in here, you'd be in trouble. OK.
So just explain to me, it's nearly over your...
I don't go any further because it's deeper than this. And anybody of age or a disability would be in serious trouble, they'd fall over.
The uneven surface is problematic for vehicles as well as pedestrians.
It's like being in a rocking chair, up and down. It will be damaging my car. It will cost me money.
In some parts of the lane, the potholes are a foot deep. The fight to fix them has consumed the life of 74-year-old Trevor.
It's continually on my mind, and it's continually I have to keep trying to get the councils to do their duties to this footpath. I want them to do their legal duty to this very, very popular and heavily used footpath.
In response, East Riding of Yorkshire Council said the public walking along the route should expect conditions similar to other public rights of way in a countryside setting. Repairs to support traffic over and above walking for those who have private vehicular rights are not the council's responsibility. The route meets a reasonable standard for this type of path, and complaints from the public remain very low. Trevor now plans to crowdfund for legal action to get the lane fixed. Anna Riley, GB News, Cottingham.
Good for you, Trevor. I love men like that.
Not potholes, they're craters.
That was absolutely unbelievable. I'm not sure I could have campaigned for decades. I think they would have got the better of me and I'd have gone down there with a bit of tarmac myself and filled it in.
They could have done a bit of crowdfunding, actually.
Yeah.
Fix them themselves.
Well, I am glad, Trevor, that we can raise awareness of your potholes. Anyway, Chris has said, I will vote for whatever party promises to fill in Trevor's potholes.
Oh.
Quite right. But you see, this is the thing. This is what people really care about.
Called bread and butter issues, and that's what you want to hear Rachel Reeves talking about and Rishi Sunak talking about. But you never do.
Absolutely. Right, that is it from us for today in Britain's Newsroom. Up next, Good Afternoon Britain with Emily and Tom. Here they are.
See you tomorrow.
There's a row erupting around media coverage. Yes, the BBC took the Reform UK press conference this morning, only to cut away saying usual, customary, inflammatory language from Nigel Farage. Are they editorialising there in the middle of a general election?
That's certainly Nigel Farage's accusation. And are young people hard done by? The Prime Minister is promising yet another boost to pensions, but young people, are they having a rough time of it? We'll have that debate.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after a showery weekend for many of us, there is further rain on the way as we head through the rest of today. This arriving into the west through the early hours of this morning and continues to push its way northwards as we head through this afternoon. But it will be a bit of a brighter start across parts of Scotland and northern England through this morning. That rain continues to turn quite heavy in places, particularly across western parts of Scotland, although we could see some showers developing across parts of Northern Ireland, central and southern parts of England. There could be some hail and thunder mixed in here too. Temperatures round about average for the time of year, 17 or 18 degrees across the south, but definitely feeling cooler under that cloud and rain. Through the rest of Tuesday evening, the rain continues to push its way northwards across parts of Scotland. The very far northeast perhaps getting away with some dry conditions, but that rain turning heavy in places, and those blustery, thundery showers continuing across parts of Northern Ireland and into southern parts of Scotland through this evening. The showers also continuing for northern parts of and eastern parts of England, but further south and further west, we will see outbreaks of rain continuing to push their way eastwards overnight tonight and into the early hours of Wednesday morning. Showers gradually easing generally, though, through the early hours of the morning, and there will be some clear spells between those showers, so perhaps turning a little chilly in places, but quite widely, those temperatures holding up into the double figures into the early hours of Wednesday morning. Around 12, 13, perhaps even 14 degrees in places, but perhaps a little lower under those clearer spells. It does mean that Wednesday starts a little drier and brighter for many of us, though. There'll be some sunshine as we head through the morning, perhaps a little cloudier, though, across parts of Scotland. But as we head in towards Wednesday afternoon, heavy showers developing again. The heavier showers once more across parts of eastern Scotland, northeastern England, but almost anywhere could see a shower through the afternoon, again with some hail and thunder mixed in too. Perhaps a little warmer than Tuesday with highs of 19 or 20 degrees and a little cooler further north.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking?
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me.